Committee Room 30, signed. 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 Committee Room 30. 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 Committee Room 30, signed. 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 Committee Room 30, Sound. 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 Committee Room 30, Sound.
Okay, colleagues, good morning and welcome to today's meeting of the Committee for the Economy. We're joined in the room and also online by Sinead McLaughlin and Padraig Delargy. I don't have any apologies, so declarations of interest, members, if any. Not seeing any. Move to item 3, Chairperson's business. So a couple of things. Firstly, members, can I thank the committee for their support at the time of the one of their approaches in Belfast, ensure the skills and community friendly area of support to the government and all that represents this week. So thank you for your help on that. The 2 labour statistics, so members will see labour published their employment statistics for Northern Ireland, record levels in terms of unemployment, but economic inactivity continues to increase. So something that we will want to continue to keep an eye on. And then finally, members, with your indulgence, I've received a request from the utility regulator to meet them in my role as chair of the committee. Are members content that I do that? Okay, thank you. Then move to draft minutes. Members of page 7 of our packs. Are members content that that's a true and accurate reflection of our deliberations last week? Agreed? Yep. Thank you. Item 5, are there any matters arising from those minutes? No. If not, then we'll move straight to a briefing on legislative consent on the Westminster Employment Bill. Colleagues, you're all very welcome back again. I'll invite you forward. Okay, we have another one. We have Colin, who is a regular attender at committee. His favourite activity on a Wednesday morning is to come here. But Colin, no, you're very welcome. Kelly, you're very welcome. And apologies, sir, I should know your name, but I don't.
Sorry, Paul Lyons.
Perfect, you're very welcome as well. Colleagues, there are a number of documents included in your pack. So page 37 is a briefing from the department. At page 302 is the UK Government fact sheet, and at page 304 the Welsh and Scottish Parliament Legislative Consent Memorandum. With that, Colin, if you're content, sir, I will hand over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak to the committee today about the legislative consent motion for the Westminster Employment Rights Bill. This bill was introduced in the House of Commons on the 10th of October 2024, and it flows from the Labour government's commitment to introduce legislation within 100 days of entering office. It aims to improve workplace conditions, extend employee protections, modernise employment laws, enhance existing provisions and introduce new rights. Most of the provisions in the bill apply only to England, Scotland and Wales. Employment law, as members will be aware from our previous briefings, is devolved here, but only to the Northern Ireland administration, not the Scottish and Welsh administrations. The bill also includes some provisions that are UK-wide. That reflects the fact there are some aspects of, I suppose, employment conditions more broadly that are reserved, such as the national minimum wage, and that is relevant to the provisions that we're really here to talk to you about today, which is the establishment of a single UK-wide enforcement body to be known as the Fair Work Agency, which will bring together a number of existing enforcement functions across a number of regimes. The bill overall is relatively large, and given the wide-ranging remit, extent of the proposed measures in the bill, there was a significant amount of work required to obtain clarity on the aspects of the bill that might require a legislative consent motion. The provisions in the bill relating to employment rights which are transferred cut across the Department for Communities, the Department for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, the Department of Finance and our own Department for the Economy. A joint legislative consent motion is being brought forward to maintain parity with Great Britain on certain matters. So for the Department for Communities, there are measures relating to reforms to statutory sick pay and the transfer of statutory sick pay enforcement and dispute resolution powers from HMRC, where they currently sit, to the proposed Fair Work Agency. For DERA, there are proposals to abolish the Gangmasters and Labour Abuse Authority, with the transfer of those functions where DERA is already involved in the carrying out of those functions to the Fair Work Agency, and there are certain saving provisions involved there too. And for the Department of Finance, there are proposals in respect of bodies carrying out reserved functions in Northern Ireland and in relation to the protection of workers in outsourced contracts that are run by those bodies. For ourselves in the Department for the Economy, there are measures in the bill which would enable the Secretary of State in the future to increase the remit of the Fair Work Agency on a range of labour market and employment legislation which may by agreement include devolved employment law, which is the responsibility of DFE. But there are no immediate impacts for DFE when the Fair Work Agency is created, unlike those other departments where the Fair Work Agency will have immediate powers that apply in Northern Ireland. So given the significant reforms proposed in relation to statutory sick pay, the Minister for Communities has agreed to lead on the legislative consent motion, and that I think is appropriate given that there are no immediate impacts for DFE once the bill completes its parliamentary passage. Minister Murphy wrote to the committee on the 30th of January to notify members of his intention that the provisions that are relevant to DFE would be included in the legislative consent motion. And while those are not insignificant provisions, they're only creating the opportunity to allow for future additions to the remit of the Fair Work Agency. There are no current plans to make any changes that will involve devolved employment law. Minister Murphy did have some concerns about the initial wording of the bill as it was originally drafted, because it gave powers to the Secretary of State to make decisions involving devolved legislation without any requirement to gain consent from the devolved administration. And he wrote to the responsible minister in the Department for Business and Trade, Justin Matters MP, on the 7th of January to express those concerns. So in response to that, Minister Matters has agreed to amend the wording of the bill to state that any future changes to the remit of the Fair Work Agency that would affect devolved employment law would require the consent of the relevant Northern Ireland department or departments to proceed, and he reiterated that commitment directly to Minister Archibald earlier this week. Minister Murphy subsequently wrote to Minister Lyons on the 15th of January seeking his agreement to DFE being part of the legislative consent motion being led by DFC, and Minister Lyons responded on the 3rd of February agreeing to that. I'd reiterate again, there are no immediate plans to add to the remit of the Fair Work Agency as it relates to devolved employment law here. But the intention of our input to the LCM is to ensure that there's the option to do that potentially at a future date, should a minister feel that that would be appropriate. So, for example, there could be economies of scale in inspection and enforcement of certain aspects of employment law being carried out by a UK-wide body. So I mentioned the functions of the existing minimum wage inspectorate, which is part of HMRC, and it could potentially be possible in future for that function, when it's part of the Fair Work Agency, to be expanded to include aspects of devolved employment law at the same time. So, for example, the payment of holiday pay could be inspected by the Fair Work Agency at the same time as they're inspecting compliance with minimum wage payment. So that's the type of issue where we might want to recommend in future to a minister that the Fair Work Agency could have a role here. So as DFC is the lead department for the legislative consent motion, the Committee for Communities has an obligation to scrutinise it, and as such we expect to be called to give evidence to the Committee for Communities, and indeed that's been scheduled for the 27th of February. So thank you for the opportunity to update the committee today, Chair, and we're happy to take questions from you and other members.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Firstly, just in terms of the wider context of the bill being brought forward by the Labour government, does the department see a clear overlap between what's being proposed by UKG and what's in the Minister's proposed Good Jobs bill?
Well, there are a number of similar issues that are included in the UK government's employment rights bill. We consulted over the summer, beginning at the beginning of July and running to the 30th of September, on our consultation document on our minister's proposed employment rights bill. So there are issues like 0 hours workers that were covered in our consultation. The UK government bill has specific proposals for a regime on 0 hours contracts, but that's not necessarily the regime that our minister will wish to adopt. So there is some overlap, but a lot of what's in our proposed bill are measures that have already been legislated on in other jurisdictions, both Westminster and in the South. So there's overlap, but they're not sort of exactly the same. And we haven't consulted on, the full regime that is set out in the UK government's employment rights bill, and in certain areas, we may not do. So it's there is that overlap.
Fair enough. And in relation to the Fair Work Agency's role in Northern Ireland, what public bodies or organisations would it be subject to the work of the Fair Work Agency?
So the Fair Work Agency would have a right to inspect compliance with employment law, and certainly initially minimum wage payment with any employer. So it would be both public, although one would hope that the public sector would always be paying minimum wage. But there's an existing regime where HMRC has a name and shame policy in relation to employers who don't comply, and you hear it reported on the local media when they put out a report that lists employers who haven't been compliant. So the intention is that that regime will continue under the new Fair Work Agency, but that there will be the option in the future for ministers to add to the aspects of employment law that employers comply with or not.
What do you envisage their relationship with the LRA here then in Northern Ireland?
So, the LRA's role is different, I suppose, in that it promotes good practice in employment relations. It arbitrates, it gets involved in early conciliation of employment disputes, particularly disputes that are brought to the tribunal, and it gives people advice on the process of making a complaint if they feel that their employment rights have been, not respected. They also would promote good practice among employers and on compliance with employment law. So it's a different role. I mean, the Fair Work Agency is more of a sort of compliance organ and enforcement organisation.
The LRA doesn't have enforcement powers, isn't that correct?
No, I mean, the enforcement really, for most aspects of employment law, is through the tribunals.
That's useful. Sinead?
Yeah, Chair, you just asked what I was going to ask there regarding the Labour Relations Agency and, you know, the role of each, because what we don't want to do is, you know, have conflicting or, you know, potentially damage maybe the role or diminish the role of the Labour Relations Agency. So you're quite sure that they're two separate and distinct, Colin?
Yes, I mean, I suppose there's an analogy with the Workplace Relations Commission in the South, in that they have a labour inspection function where they can go in and inspect a wide range of aspects of compliance with employment law. So they would undertake the function in the South that's the equivalent of the HMRC current function here of minimum wage compliance, but they would also have powers to inspect any aspect of employment law compliance that they're asked to do. And my understanding is that the Workplace Relations Commission model, that inspection function they have, has been an influence on the UK government in developing its policy on this area, and indeed that's policy development that was going on under the previous government as well as the current one. So it's I suppose a long-term objective, as I understand it, of the UK government to widen the provision of labour inspection, which happens internationally and has really been limited in the UK to minimum wage compliance up to now.
And just a second question, and it's kind of on a wider issue. And Colin, the last time you were before committee, we were talking about the Good Jobs Bill and all of that. But is your department really engaging in enough detail and that wider comprehensive fashion with this new bill to ensure that we don't fall behind GB if relevant advances are made when it comes to actual workers' rights?
Well, there are aspects of, I mean, as I mentioned at the start, there's some of the issues that we consulted on over the summer where there are regimes set out in the UK government's bill that will be applied in England, Scotland and Wales. In some instances, I mean, our minister will take a decision on the way forward based on the issues we consulted on, and I suppose it's possible in some areas that could look similar to the UK government's model that it set out. In others it may not do, but it'll be based on the reflection on the consultation exercise that was carried out and the views of business and trade unions, employee and employer representatives that were expressed during the consultation process. But there may be some issues where they're in the new GB Employment Rights Bill that we haven't consulted on, and we wouldn't have capacity within the current mandate to legislate on. And those would probably need to await a further employment bill in the next mandate.
Right, so there could be, there is potential that they will be moving maybe forward in a quicker fashion than we will be. So then there could be potential that we will be falling behind on workers' rights. Is that what you're saying, or am I thinking, by the way, the sound's not great here?
There may be some issues where they will be legislating now that we won't be able to legislate on the current mandate, but there are also quite a number of aspects of the GB Employment Rights Bill which I suppose are restoring the position of employment law in GB to be more in line with how it is here, because there were changes made to employment law by the previous UK government, especially in relation to trade unions, where there were reductions in trade union rights that were not made here, and where this bill is actually bringing it back more closely in line with the position that has remained the case here all along.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Sinead.
you.
David.
Kind of cover quite a bit of what I was going to ask as well. But who does this work now here?
So the work, I mean, I suppose that's the work on inspecting minimum wage is done by HMRC. I mentioned the functions that are carried out by DERA on behalf of the Gang Masters and Labour Abuse Authority. So that will continue, but it will become part of the new Fair Work Agency. The statutory sick pay provisions are currently also inspected by HMRC. So they will be part of the Fair Work Agency. Yes. So at the moment, if there were other areas that a minister was going to ask the Fair Work Agency to look at in the future, such as holiday pay, there isn't that inspection function at the moment. That would be something new that I suppose the provisions in the bill would allow a future minister to agree with the UK government. So
are we taking, you're saying about the DERA bit, and I get that, so you're literally taking people in an office and moving them into a different role?
So as I understand it, and I mean, I don't work for DERA, and I'm not very closely familiar with how it works, but my understanding is there are officials who are employed by DERA who are effectively kind of seconded to work for the Gang Masters and Labour Abuse Authority at the moment, and they will simply transfer to be working on behalf of the Fair Work Agency.
Is it the same with the HMRC then?
So HMRC, those are HMRC staff currently. And my assumption is that they will become Fair Work Agency staff. So
there's nothing within the Labour Relations? But
no.
There's no duplication?
No, there are no functions transferring from the Labour Relations Agency.
I'm good. Yeah, cheers, thank you.
Emma.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to you all for coming in this morning. I suppose I just wanted to ask for a wee bit more detail on the sort of remit of the LCM. I know you touched there that the Minister has sort of sought assurance that nothing can be implemented in the North without our agreement here, but just if you would elaborate on that, on how, I know this is an ongoing concern with LCMs. I suppose going through, I know the Good Jobs Bill has been sort of a priority for both the previous and current Minister, and that whole missing piece where workers an awful lot of the time aren't aware of their rights, and the only way that people do seek their rights is individual cases, and we've seen that very clearly throughout COVID, and even a few weeks ago with the storm, where people weren't just sure about whether or not what their employer was telling them was correct or legal. And so I think any progress on bringing people awareness of what their rights are in the workplace can only be a positive thing. But just that we concern about the overlap, or where their jurisdiction ends. Is that?
Yeah, Kelly, do you want to pick up?
I mean, the LCM in itself isn't related to how someone can assert their rights.
No, I know.
So would you like me to answer a little bit more about the LCM? Or
yes, please, yeah.
So the LCM in itself, for ourselves in DFE, what we are doing is just trying to protect a future minister's right to be included in the work of the Fair Work Agency, should they deem that appropriate at the time. Nothing's going to happen upon creation of the Fair Work Agency for DFE. Nothing will change. Everything will be the same. But with regard to actually the changing of the text of the bill that allowed our Minister to agree to be part of the LCM, we're working with officials in the Department of Business and Trade on that at the moment, and it's with the Office of Parliamentary Counsel. So we have been given assurances of the text that they're going to put in there, and it's going to include a full consent mechanism, so that in the future, if the Secretary of State wanted to widen the remit of the Fair Work Agency across employment law, in order to do so and include Northern Ireland, it would have to have the full consent of the appropriate Northern Ireland Minister at that time. So they couldn't proceed and include Northern Ireland without our consent. So that's the changes that we're seeking to make for the LCM.
In the original version of the text, a Secretary of State in Whitehall could have made a change to the aspects of devolved employment legislation that the Fair Work Agency could inspect without consulting the Minister here. So the change that is to be made in response to the Minister's intervention is that the Secretary of State in Whitehall can't either add to or vary or take away from the functions that the Fair Work Agency would carry out in respect of devolved employment law here.
You're confident that'll...
Yeah, no, we've definitely had a clear assurance from the Minister and DBT.
As the bill progresses in GB, once it gets through certain stages, then you will see that amendment be placed in the text there on the bill. It just has to go through the formal process to get to that stage. But on your other point about people knowing about their rights and being able to actually assert their rights, it's actually a good point with regards to the questions about the role of the Labour Relations Agency. That's really where the Labour Relations Agency steps in. They're there to promulgate, promote, make employers and employees alike aware of their rights, and that's part of their role, working with the department. And that's a very different role to the actual enforcement then of the rights with employers. So that's where the LRA will come in.
Yeah, no, I suppose it struck me in both the premise of the Good Jobs Bill and what that sets to do, and this LCM that we're discussing, in that both ultimately have the, I suppose, objective that people are able to exercise their rights, and whether it be, like, I know I would signpost people to the LRA. The vast majority of people that come to me with an issue in their workplace are not aware of that body and have no understanding of how to utilise it. So it's, I suppose, any conversation that we have around workers' rights will then lead to an increase in people understand what their rights are and how to enforce them should they need to.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's likely to continue to be the first port of call to refer people to the LRA, and then they'll be aware of where the Fair Work Agency has a role if they need to refer them on further to them. I think the simplest thing, if anyone has an employment rights issue, is to suggest that they contact the LRA in the first instance, and they are very well versed in the full employment relations system.
Thank you, Emma. Vice Chairman.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the briefing this morning. Two questions from me. First of all, could you maybe talk through, just to be clear, in terms of the timescales for the Westminster Bill, but also in terms of, so the DFC, the Communities Committee, have indicated that their scrutiny of the LCM will take place, and this will likely be debated then in the Chamber sometime in March, April time. How then does that line up? I want you just to remind me in terms of the Good News Bill as to where the Minister is on that.
Good News Bill?
The good. I literally just said to John, I nearly called it the Good News Bill, I just did. Let me rephrase that, because it's not good news for many businesses. The Good Jobs Bill. The Good Jobs Bill. So where is that at in terms of that being brought forward, and also in terms of just the consideration for the fact that many businesses are rightly concerned about the Good Jobs Bill, and how have they, in terms of your opinion, been consulted in relation to the Westminster Bill?
Well, I mean, the Westminster government has taken a particular approach to this bill. They made a commitment to introduce a bill to Parliament in their first 100 days. They don't have a consultation requirement as we would have in relation to any change in policy. So, that they've in a sense introduced the bill and then they're consulting afterwards. And a lot of the provisions that are in the bill will take time to introduce, and they'll be done through secondary legislation following the consultation exercises that they'll carry out. So, I mean, for example, if you read the section of the bill that deals with 0 hours contracts, for example, there are an awful lot of time periods and so on that aren't defined, and those are what they're consulting on in subsequent exercises. So it can be quite difficult reading the bill to understand exactly what it's planning to bring in. So our process has been that we've run the consultation exercise on the issues. Then the Minister will take the policy decisions and get agreement from the Executive on the drafting of the bill. That's the process she's required to follow. Then the Office of the Legislative Counsel are asked to draft the bill, which will take several months. And our intention is that we introduce the bill to the Assembly in January of 2026.
I suppose it's the difference being in terms of the Good Jobs Bill. The difficulty with that, I have to get that out of my head now, because my son goes to the Good News Club. It's slightly different, isn't it? The Good Jobs Bill Some of the frustrations from the business community was the fact that there were a lack of proposals, and that obviously it was the consultation, but they felt that there was a proposal. So it seems to be the opposite case in terms of the Westminster bill, where obviously the proposals are there, but the consultation comes after it. So it's just one that we obviously need to keep an eye on. But look, thanks for that, and thanks for that.
I mean, it will take quite a while for a lot of the provisions in the Westminster bill to actually come into effect because of that consultation afterwards. So it may be that the actual implementation timeline at the end of the process isn't that different.
Right, okay.
But it's just the process is different to get there.
Diana?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. Good morning. It's good to see you both again, and welcome to the committee. A lot of my questions really have been answered, so thank you for that. But I'm looking at the policy intent, a few details there that over time the FWA will take on enforcement of a wider range of employment rights. Over what period of time, and how is that being communicated to employers and employees? The vast remit they're going to take on, and how will that differ? Will there be areas that Northern Ireland continues to differ from GB ultimately in the protection, in terms of worker protections?
I mean, I suppose there's still a lot of detail to be worked out about the time frame for any additional functions to be added to the Fair Work Agency. I mean, the intention of the UK government is that once it's created, it will then be asked to take on additional functions, as ministers feel is appropriate. But certainly the one there has been a lot of discussion about already is holiday pay enforcement and inspection. But even that, I don't think we have a timescale from the UK government.
GB doesn't even have a timescale for it yet. I mean, they're working at pace to fulfil this manifesto commitment to get the bill there, which they have done, and a lot of the thinking, working out timescales, is coming afterwards. So they don't know at this stage.
And I suppose if it came to devolved areas of employment legislation being added to the remit of the Fair Work Agency, we would expect to consult on that before it happened.
Mm-hmm. And just on a wider point, we're trying to encourage a growth agenda, within business, business sectors in particular. And when you look at encouraging leadership and employers, encouraging employment and encouraging people to grow, to create businesses, in terms of training and education for future industry leaders, is that education piece going to be there as to the obligations?
Well, there's quite a lot of training provided already on employment relations, on HR management and so on, and the various professions take these changes to employment legislation on board in the training that they provide. They will. There's a whole sort of, I suppose, system of annual conferences and that kind of thing, and they always focus on any changes that have been made during the year. I suppose the training that is offered is updated to take account of any changes, and that would happen routinely.
I'm just thinking from an investment point of view, the regulatory requirements in Northern Ireland and GB compared to other places where investors may choose to invest. Has that been considered, as an impediment maybe to investing here?
Well, I mean, I suppose there has been some work done. I think I mentioned when I was in front of the committee before, work by the Resolution Foundation that compared enforcement of employment rights and indeed, what the employment rights were internationally, and I suppose showed that the UK as a whole is very much in line with and perhaps has a slightly lower level of employment rights than most European countries, but significantly higher level of employment rights than the USA. So, I mean, I think that would be this function of, I suppose it would be referred to as workplace inspection or labour inspection, would routinely take place in a number of other European countries. But maybe less so in the US.
Thank you, Diana. Jonathan?
Thanks, Chair. I think always to start with this, I don't believe that Northern Ireland has per worker rights. I don't believe that the UK has per worker rights. Where there is bad actors, as there is in every society, it's important that we root that out. I suppose probably in looking at this, and the officials will know I have been on record with concern, as has business representatives and other members of the committee, about some of the impacts of the Minister's Good Jobs Bill will have on industry here in Northern Ireland, and particularly, as Diana has mentioned, on the growth agenda. But just on this specific, so obviously in relation to the LCM and the particulars that apply to the Department for Economy, it's purely on the UK-wide Fair Work Agency, is that correct? Yes. So, in a sense, the only real issue for us at this stage, whether or not we want to take into consideration the overall employment rights bill whenever that's going forward and what's going to be cross-complicable with the Minister's Good Jobs Bill, is something for a debate for another day. So on the issue of particularly minimum wage, which is the one that we're studying here in relation to how HMRC currently enforce that particular, and that's going to now change. Well, HMRC have obviously such a wealth of institutional knowledge in relation to this and access to lifetime data. How does that change with the Fair Work Agency, and are you confident that they will be able to track, monitor and report in a way which is, the gold standard is HMRC? And that's something that will concern me as to ensure that there's a proper reporting.
So, that aspect of what happens isn't devolved. So HMRC does that currently, and the UK government has decided to move that function into this new Fair Work Agency. I would expect, although I couldn't say so definitively, that the staff who carry this work out will transfer into the new organisation, and the way they carry out that work will be broadly the same. But it's just that there are other functions, such as the Employment Agency Standards Inspectorate, which operates in GB. We have our own Employment Agency Inspectorate within the department here, and that's not affected by this proposal, unless a minister in the future should decide that it should maybe become part of the Fair Work Agency.
I suppose on the specific column, what I'm trying to say is that, so at present, if there was suspected misdemeanour in terms of an employer towards minimum wage, the appropriate way to investigate that is obviously through payroll to begin with. So what I'm trying to understand is that, will the Fair Work Agency have access to payroll lifetime data in the same way that HMRC do?
My understanding is that they will. Just to say, and this is an understanding because this has been taken forward by DBT, and they have not ironed out all of the details for the creation of the Fair Work Agency yet. My understanding is that upon creation, all the enforcement that they're bringing in, which is national minimum wage, statutory sick pay and the gangmasters, how that is done will not change. The name that it's under will change, but how it is done will not change. That's my understanding.
Yeah, well, that certainly clarifies that. I suppose that's just in relation to this LCM. So I suppose taking aside my wider concerns about an overarching Good Jobs Bill and its impact on industry and also on productivity. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. No other colleagues have indicated. I just wanted to seek one final piece of clarity, if that's okay, Colin. So you said that the change that the Minister was seeking was that it required ministerial approval.
Yeah.
Is that, are you sure it's the word ministerial, not departmental?
Departmental, yeah.
Okay.
It is, yeah.
And that's different from, obviously, any other changes being sought by Scottish or Welsh counterparts. They're looking for the word minister.
Yeah, it's in Scotland and Wales, these issues aren't devolved, so the issue doesn't arise. It's a specific issue.
The word's department, not minister.
Yeah.
It's department, department or departments.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. And that was because the minister had concerns that legislation may impact upon the devolved competency of the Northern Ireland Assembly.
Yeah, well, that a Whitehall Secretary of State would have had the power to make changes that affected devolved legislation without consulting with the devolved administration.
As I made the point at a previous committee meeting, the same minister doesn't seem to have the same concern about EU law impacting without any consent of the Northern Ireland Assembly. But that's a party political point and not one for you to respond to. So thank you very much indeed, as always, for your representation.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I literally just said to you.
Did you give him your script, Emma?
generally relaxed subject.
He literally just said there before that. He says, "Everyone having to send good news."
A worm in your
We do need a good news bill.
So, members, I just wanted to sum up there. So, maybe I'm reading the room wrong, but I think members are content with the proposals in the LCM, subject to seeing a copy of the proposed amendment secured by the department. We should write to the department,
The Committee for Communities.
because they'll undertake the scrutiny work. Are members content with that proposal? Okay, that's great.
Great. Okay.
Thank you, members. Okay, colleagues, item 7, Social Enterprise Co-Design Group, Social Enterprise Action Plan. I'm delighted to welcome our friends and colleagues from the sector, and I'll invite you forward. So, members, starting at page 381, there's a briefing paper from the Co-Design Group at page 321, the Social Enterprise Action Plan at 320, Departmental Correspondence on Community Wealth Building at 340, copy of DEFC commissioned research, and the Public Procurement Note on Social Value. I'm delighted that we have Dave Linton, founder and CEO of Madlog, co-chairperson of the group, Maeve Monaghan, who will be known to many of you, and Mr. Jess, who will be known to even more of us. So thank you all very much for coming along. The committee is very supportive of your sector and of the important work that you've been engaged in recently, so thank you for that. And at this stage I'm happy to hand over to you to make some opening remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to address you today regarding Northern Ireland's social economy and the progress of Social Enterprise Action Plan, or SEIP. My name is Dave Linton. I'm the founder of Madlog. I've got alongside me Maeve Monaghan from the Now Group and Colin Jess from Social Enterprise NI. So today our briefing aims to provide you with a comprehensive overview of Northern Ireland's social economy, with a particular focus on the initiatives encapsulated within the SEIP. This plan was developed to address existing challenges while unlocking new opportunities for the social enterprise sector. We will discuss the crucial role of the co-design group in guiding our effects and ensuring the objectives of the SEIP are achieved.
So the social economy in Northern Ireland is a vital component of our region's economic and social landscape. It encompasses a diverse range of organisations, including social enterprises, charities, community initiatives and cooperatives. Social enterprises specifically are unique in that they blend commercial trading with social and environmental objectives. Northern Ireland currently is the home for 843 social enterprises, collectively employing around 25,000 individuals and generating an estimated annual turnover of £980 million. I would add, Chair, that those figures are currently being updated with the recent appointment of Queen's University and University of Middlesex to bring forward updated statistics, because those were actually stats pre-COVID. So it would be good for us just to get the updated statistics for the sector. These enterprises play a critical role in addressing urgent social issues, including job creation, health improvement, community enhancement, and tackling social exclusion. While charities and voluntary organisations also contribute significantly to our society, today's discussion will centre primarily on the importance and the impact of social enterprises.
And I suppose we would like to say that we feel that the department have really embraced this discussion around social enterprise, and I think it comes at a very, very important time for a very important sector. But as we explore the social enterprise and landscape in Northern Ireland, it's clear that organisations face key challenges. With limited access to funding, it is a significant barrier, particularly in attracting investors focused on social impact rather than financial returns. Additionally, there's often, there is a lack of awareness and understanding of what social enterprises are, and I think both Colin and Dave have mentioned that. Many have a charitable arm, but the trading element and the profitability element of social enterprise is key. And that many don't understand the value that we provide as well. These organisations also encounter difficulties in competing for public sector contracts against larger corporations, primarily due to resource limitations. And I think the committee will be already aware of the pressures that are on businesses in general with the increased national insurance requirement and the national minimum wage requirement that is facing our sector as well, and many organisations working with entry-level positions. Important to also note that a lot of the employees in social enterprises are people who are furthest removed from the labour market, and those that the department would be wanting to support. So furthermore, uncertainty around government policy and funding levels can hinder long-term planning and government decisions. So an important challenge that social enterprises regularly face is effectively balancing our social missions with the need for profitability. And we welcome making money in social enterprises. It's just what we do with it that's different. The balancing act is essential for our sustainability, and we can often lead to difficult decisions regarding resources against the prioritisation of our service users. However, there are numerous opportunities on the horizon, and we're a very optimistic bunch, an entrepreneurial bunch. So the growing demand for social value among consumers and businesses is reshaping expectations and preferences in the marketplace. And I can attest to the fact that the interest from the private sector around collaborating with social enterprise has never been greater, and therein lies an opportunity. So the SEAP, paired with supportive government policies and legislation, creates a robust framework to foster growth within the Northern Ireland social enterprise sector.
So this SEAP is designed to tackle the challenges faced by profit with purpose social enterprises in Northern Ireland. It aims to raise awareness of social enterprises, improve access to financial resources, enhance leadership skills, and streamline procurement processes to support these organisations effectively. The co-design group has been instrumental in shaping the SEAP and guiding its implementation. So where are we to date? We are pleased to report that since the launch of the Social Enterprise Action Plan, there has been notable progress, including the appointment of social enterprise champions in Invest NI, Intertrade Ireland and every council, which is currently, these champions are undergoing training with Social Enterprise NI and Work West today as we meet here. And they will be focused on development special, Currently, these champions are undergoing training with Social Enterprise NI and Work West. Additionally, Invest NI, Intertrade Ireland have initiated the development of specialised leadership programme tailored for social enterprises, with Invest NI also ring-fencing spaces specifically for these organisations within their main leadership programme. These initiatives highlight our commitment to fostering a positive and supportive environment for growth. So the next steps, looking ahead, the co-design group will continue to convene regularly to monitor progress, evaluate outcomes, and adjust our strategies as needed. The group is really committed to not just doing the pre-work, but holding to account the delivery of this work. So we will continue to meet to do that. So our ask today, as we advance, we seek your cross-party support for the Social Enterprise Action Plan and the social enterprise sector. We realise that the Minister had put this group together, but for this to really be successful, we really need cross-party support as a sector. The support is vital for the effective delivery of the plan and for ensuring that it promotes a strong regional balance in its implementation. Together, we can create a meaningful impact that strengthens the social enterprise sector and enhances Northern Ireland's economic landscape by increasing the number of good jobs, raising productivity, decarbonising our economy, and driving forward regional balance. We greatly value the support and insights of this committee as we work collaboratively to develop the social enterprise ecosystem in Northern Ireland. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to our discussions and welcome any questions you may have regarding the SEAP and its implications for our economy.
Colin, thank you very much indeed for that. Firstly, I warmly welcome the publication of this report. I've long been a champion for the vital role that your sector plays, particularly in relation to what I view as regional balance. I don't see that just as being across Northern Ireland, but in the most hard-pressed communities where I represent in North Belfast, it tends to be social enterprises who employ people from our community in our community. So thank you for all the work that you do. I just wanted to pick up in relation to the implementation, because I think that's the key of all all of this. You all gave, and all members of the group freely gave of your time to feed into this and to produce a great document, but I don't think your members or anyone will judge the work of the action plan by the great words on the page, but the implementation of it. So just to flag up or ask you in terms of your view of the implementation, so page 6 of the Social Enterprise Action Plan has the departments, and it's the department's responsibility to implement some of this. So I'm just keen to, I think you've said there, item 6 is progressed well, so Invest in I have the dedicated leadership. So in terms of evaluating the existing training provision that's available to your sector, that's a target completion date for next month. Do you see that as being underway by the department and to be complete next month?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. And then in relation to the funding mechanisms for social enterprise, so item 9 is the Social Enterprise Growth Fund. Maybe I'm picking this up incorrectly, but is that a view of looking at trying to better utilise FTC here in Northern Ireland?
I don't think we've got to that level of discussion
sure.
around it, but I think that would be one of the options. I think the important thing that the group are discussing is an element of access to finance.
Yes.
Could be a challenge for the sector, but also the requirement for working capital. Chair, a lot of these organisations don't have the grant. It needs to be a mixture of both.
Okay.
And I think we've been very, very keen that we need to talk about scaling,
Yes.
an increase in turnover, an increase in productivity, and to be able to do that, organisations need some working capital to grow, just like any other business would.
Yes, no, 100%. So that was due to be completed by next month, the work from the department's perspective. I have read the draft budget from the department next year, and maybe my glasses aren't as good as they should be, but I struggled to find a budget line for this capital or loan scheme. Am I missing something that the department's informed you of?
Yeah, you haven't missed anything. I think the reality is that they were doing a bit of research to see where the need was before into doing that. So that's where they're at.
Okay, no problem. And then finally, just in terms of community wealth building, so it's something that I'm just keen to get your expertise on it, something that I'm particularly interested in, and the Community Ownership Fund, which will obviously come to an end soon from Westminster. My view is that the Department for the Economy, the Department for Communities and the Executive Office should come together to have a Northern Ireland dedicated Community Ownership Fund, because our community assets and our business organisations that are provided in our community, owned by our community, I think are the best examples of them. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts, or the group have any thoughts about a community ownership fund that would that be helpful for social enterprises from your perspective?
It wasn't discussed as part of the group, but I think there was a number, for instance, representatives from DTNI were there, and a number of the enterprise centres. So I think that the group were supportive of that, but wanted to have the clarity of the difference between that piece of work and social enterprise, so the two don't get mixed up, because both need investment and support it. But I don't know if you want to add to that, Chair.
Yeah, we took a very probably narrow line, but focused line within the action plan. We realised that part of the confusion around social enterprises, we are sometimes seen as charities, sometimes seen as trading bodies, and it's very hard then you're really asking for every department to help. So we took this line of, we wanted to make sure the enterprise part and the profit bit, and we didn't want profit to be a dirty word in our sector, but an essential word, that out of that profit is then replacing that for impact. So without profit we have no impact. So our line in this was, how do we help the enterprise part of social enterprises? How do we make them viable businesses? Not blended where they're not viable, but how do we help them be viable? How do we grow leadership to be viable? And then with that, make profit. So we kept it very narrow. We did recognise and support the community wealth building programme, but we saw the enterprise part of a social economy rather than just this social economy part.
I suppose, Chair, from the point of view of the representative body, that's one of the challenges we face, is just that how to make the sector more enterprising and more entrepreneurial. There are plenty of entrepreneurial people there. It's the upskilling and the increasing the capacity of the sector is a challenge, and it's been one that's ongoing. But I think, as Dave said, that this is sort of trying to focus specifically on the entrepreneurial side of it, and how we can actually help and develop that with the challenges that are out there at the moment too, with cost of doing business, which is only increasing after the autumn budget particularly as well, and we've made that point very clear.
No, exactly. And just finally from me, and maybe it's more for you, Maeve, in relation to the forthcoming ending of the shared prosperity funding. I think it would be a missed opportunity if we just didn't put on the record the impact that particularly your organisation, but I'm not as familiar with yours, Dave, but may impact you as well, of that cliff edge next year, and the vital role that those fundings are playing in supporting some of the most vulnerable people in our society.
I thank you, Chair, for putting that on note, because I think it is a significant cliff edge that just keeps getting pushed down the line, with a very, very vibrant sector that are delivering significant impacts and delivering a lot of the outcomes that the department are requiring. So part of the initiative here is to be clear at the beginning that this piece of work wasn't to lobby for a replacement of UK SPF, because it's very much about the sustainability of social enterprise, but to note that a lot of social enterprises are in receipt of that funding, and something needs to be done quickly. We can't be sitting at the 31st of March again next year not knowing if we've got money to pay salaries the day after.
Exactly.
Particularly with a sector that's really struggling to retain the people we have in communities where and supporting the most vulnerable. So the committee supporting your support in that, Chair, is welcomed.
Thank you very much. I've hogged the limelight enough. Padraig.
Thanks, Chair. Just checking you can hear me okay, yeah?
There, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, look, thanks very much for your presentation. And as the Chair said, for all the work that goes on in all our communities and right across the North. I suppose I just have two questions, really. It was just in terms of the action plan that you've mentioned. In terms of the implementations, then, how are they measured or evaluated? What sort of metrics do you use on those?
Say it's very early stages at this stage regarding that. We've got it launched, and we've had one meeting since Christmas to kind of keep us updated, and we're getting regular feedback from the department. That's why we intend to meet regularly, to ask the tough questions and to hold to account, because I'm personally not prepared to give time to something that is, we are, and it just keeps going down the line. I have too many other things I could be doing. So we're very much about taking advantage of this group. We have some of the best thinkers in our sector around the table, and we want to actually make this deliver a significant impact in Northern Ireland, compared to just it being a piece of a paper document that's been launched. So that's, at this stage, is what we're doing to do that, but we will look on different measurements as we journey through that.
Could I just add, Chair, if it's okay? Neither Dave nor I will be behind the door in challenging that. I think that's one of the reasons why being involved, and we would want to note our thanks to the department and the officials for being really open and open with us and helping us to look at getting this plan together. I think the piece for us now, and we've met with the team in the department to say, right, what next, and how will we know? But some key developments already that they're seismic in a way, is the difference in the relationship and the discussion with InvestNI, for instance, with our sector. As an organisation that struggled for 3 years to become an InvestNI client and have ongoing support now, it is an open door, and certainly the new opportunities with Intertrade Ireland as well are significant. So we can see definite progress. What we need to do is help support the sector to have the confidence and the capabilities and the startup revenue to be able to take advantage of those now. So we will be holding, we will deliver on that plan, absolutely, but it is a fair wind that we have from the department as well, which is good to see.
And Chair, I suppose, just again from the representative body's perspective, it's great that we have such strong people on that action plan. I have seen the outputs of the meetings, and this is a sector that I believe just needs that support, needs that recognition. The relationship that Maeve refers to, InvestNI, is very important for us as well. We've met them as a representative body for a long time, and I think the perception always was that InvestNI, if you're not exporting, nobody's going to be in there to support. The training that's going on at the moment, there's a number of InvestNI staff there. I'm heading from here down to there to do a session this afternoon on it, and I think it's important, but that will be an ongoing process. It's not just in relationship now, this is your day, and that's it. We will be looking through the action plan to hold them to account, to make sure that we come back on a regular basis, because that training might be what the sector is at the moment, but the sector is developing and evolving, so it needs to be kept up to date and kept up to speed with those through those officials. And the Intertrade Ireland as well, we're delighted to see that, because we're now building relationships cross-border, and Social Enterprise Northern Ireland has just begun the Discovery Programme, working alongside Social Enterprise RI to help the sustainability and help organisations on both sides of the border, bring them together to help develop that relationship, to help them learn from each other, share best practice. So I think those relationships, Invest and Intertrade being involved in this, is very, very important, as is the one with local councils as well, I would say.
Yes.
Patrick, anything else?
Thanks for that. It's really reassuring to hear that, I suppose, and obviously your commitment to making sure that there are measurable outcomes and achievable targets as well, because as you say, it keeps everything right, and it just means that it's action focused. So it's really encouraging that from the outset, I suppose that's very clearly, I suppose, your vision and your aim for it. Just wondering around the organisations that you've spoken about as well, in terms of the social return then, is that to be measured in community specifically, or is that social return going to be measured like across the north, or what way does that work?
Regarding social enterprise, it's really, I think there's the social enterprises that are really community focused, which is why we separated it out of the community wealth building, because that's one section. For our own business, it's we're working right across the whole of the UK and Ireland in our impact, and it's less about a local community, so the measurement is different. But I think as a sector, that's an area where we need to improve on, is how we measure our social value and social impact back in. I'm sure
it's probably one of my favourite topics. So with Now Group, for every £1 invested, we're returning around £21 in social value. So we're recording that annually. It's not as easy for a lot of organisations to do that. We would assume, and we'll be working particularly around the survey that's going out with the sector to try to get some indicative piece in that, because we need a baseline, and as Colin says, the stats are quite old-aged now, like myself, and need to be updated. But I think lots of the time these amazing organisations don't even know the impact that they're delivering. They're so busy doing it. So I think we need a bit of support with them as well, to understand how to measure and report it, and we'll be certainly looking at that as part of the report as well.
That's great to hear, because I think that's one of the things is, around that, and just actually understanding the impact that the communities and the social enterprises have. So, but really reassured to hear that. I'm sure colleagues have other questions as well, so thanks very much for that.
Thank you, Patrick. Kate.
Thank you, Chair. Dave, I feel like you were about to follow up on that. I was going to ask a question, have a number of questions, and I'm delighted you're here today. When I was on Belfast City Council, we talked about community wealth building all the time. I feel like you didn't get a meeting without talking about Preston, what they were doing in Preston. But there was some criticism that community wealth building is at odds with inclusive growth. Just interested in your views on that, but also what point you were about to finish up on.
Yeah, it was just around the impact piece, that the best way of measuring impact is profit. You've no impact if you've no profit. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're really committed to in our sector, is we've got to generate a profit.
That's right. And
our profit is in who employs the workers on our workforce who maybe don't have opportunities to get work other places, or we get to give products. So I think once we get profit, we'll have great impact, because our governance is all about locked asset. And so, that everything we do is locked to the benefit of our social impact. Mm. But to do that, we need our profits. So that's very much where we focused on as a group. And then there's additional funding required to supplement that, because sometimes we're carrying stuff that eats into the profit margins, that the profit isn't enough, but the business has got to be viable. And once we get the profit right, we will. And I know it's a dirty word, but profit is impact, social impact.
I don't think it is when you phrase it that way, but it is impact. Yeah.
It is, sorry to the chair, it is a word that people sort of tend away from, making a profit, because they nearly feel we shouldn't be doing this. But if you don't make a profit, you don't have an impact.
Can't do it or we do.
Hashtag profit with purposes, because what we have come to find, and all our jurisdictions and countries use the term not for profit, and we tend to shy away from that because that indicates that you're not there to make a profit. Social enterprise won't exist unless they do make a profit. So it is that profit with purpose, as you say, that needs to be generated.
But just back to your point, if I may, around inclusive growth, I think the important part of that is, you know, the voluntary and community sector are a very important part of that, but social enterprises have a different role to play there. Some of it is around delivering the services for people who need to be included in the growth, but there's also that part of the amount of money that's been invested in the development of our cities and our councils around inclusive growth needs to have social enterprises in their supply chain. And I think the council has been involved as the ambassadors. This is a really important piece because that relationship hasn't been an equal one. So I think the potential for us to tender in to tenders and contracts that large councils are delivering, we need help to be commercially viable enough to do that, even to meet the criteria to be able to tender for it. But the relationship has to change. This isn't everybody else does well and then they do unto us. This is nobody can do well unless we're part of the mix. So when I look at inclusive growth, I think that social enterprise should be part of every supply chain and every council for the delivery, and then let us do the bit about delivering for the vulnerable communities, because that's part of that's the profit with the purpose. There just isn't enough opportunities for organisations to tender for commercial opportunities. Lots of opportunities for an organisation like Now Group, for instance, to run cafes that the private sector don't want because they're not profitable, but not enough conversations about profitable contracts that social enterprises could collaborate on. So I think that's where the opportunity is in inclusive growth.
Okay, really useful. Can I ask then, just on that, I'm really interested in the social enterprise champions piece, and you mentioned that they're having that training now, and obviously they're in every council, and Trade Ireland is supporting as well. Can you talk a bit more about how that's going and how it intends to go? The 25 volunteers, is that right at the moment? And kind of what's the long-term vision for this?
So the plan for the champions was there was a lack of awareness within, you know, what is social enterprise in some of our core departments, councils. There's such a broad. So the champions was really a place where social enterprise could be championed within that. But when we were working with the minister on this at the time, it was more than that. It was whenever internal discussions were being had, that the champions within would bring social enterprise into those conversations as well. So it wasn't just a person that we had contact with, but somebody who was champion within. So it's a very new thing. It's an early stage thing. The training's happening today. We've a lot of work as a sector to really build out, like, what is a definition that we use for social enterprise. So that's going to be a continual ongoing. And then there's probably a need for the champions to go across each department. And that's just a next challenge, really, to get to the next level across the departments, that there's champions within that. So it's really advocating within as well as supporting from outside. So that's the plan for the champions.
Okay.
Trains happen today, and we'll see where it goes after that.
And keep us updated, because I think it's something that everyone on the committee is very interested in and keen to champion as well. So thank you for your presentations and your work.
Thank you, Kate. Gary?
Thanks, Chair. And first of all, just to commend the work of the co-design group. I think it is fantastic, and to see an action plan with timelines, I think, is refreshing. You know, we often see strategies and plans, and if there's no timelines, then it's very difficult to measure anything against what has been achieved. And just on Kate's, I was just going to ask that very question in terms of the social enterprise champions, because I think in terms of getting the word out of the success of social enterprise, particularly within our councils, so I would be keen to hear more about, you know, who those champions are, so that we as elected representatives can support them in their role, and I think that's something we want to promote as well. So if you could share that detail with us, that would be very much appreciated. Just I suppose, without asking that question again, just in terms of the delivery targets, obviously there are, as the Chair said, a number of targets that are coming up soon, and it's your role obviously to make sure that they're done. Are there any of those targets that you would have particular concern about, or things that maybe as a committee that we could assist you in ensuring that those targets are met?
Excuse me.
The targets really at the start is the champions and the leadership program. So we already have that from September. There will be 2 positions on the leadership program for Invest NI, and so we're confident that will be. And I think that's a really exciting thing for me, because I don't think it's a help social enterprise space. This private sector needs social enterprises as much as we need the private, because what the private sector don't know an awful lot about is the social part, and what we bring is the social expertise, and what they have in abundance is the leadership experience of how to scale, how to grow businesses. So I don't think it's us coming in just to learn. I think it's a collaboration which is going to do both sectors very strong. So that is starting in September when we have that commitment, and I'm aware of that Intertrade Ireland is already working with Invest NI to do the specific social enterprise programme. Learn.
See, in terms of the piece around the local government commissioning, so you've stated that obviously you're working with I think it's Belfast City Council and Solace. In terms of your engagement with them, is it at the moment, in terms of are there legislative barriers as to why councils cannot do more, or is it a simple case of it's a bit of a sporadic approach as to some councils are much better at it than others, and I don't mean that in terms of in any slant against those councils who aren't doing it. It may simply be a capacity issue as opposed to anything else.
I think one of the main barriers of the council and the commission and stuff is that we haven't got a legislation in place in Northern Ireland. I mean, that's the bottom line. Policies are good for government, our departments, but actually they don't go outside of that. So there's nothing saying that you need to do it. Yeah. And so that's a number one barrier, is that it's all down to each council working out what's right for them. So we really need a legislation. We need the Social Value Act here in Northern Ireland. But Maeve, you might know some more about the practicalities of this.
Yes, thanks, Dave. I would say it comes down to how much we're valued and understanding about social enterprise. I don't think we would speak to anybody in council or any department who doesn't think it's a good job. We're doing it's a good thing we're doing. But I think the conversation and the thought process about how you invest in our sector is different than than council and departments would think about doing business with the private sector. And I think that's where the attitude has to change. So often when it comes to it's startup initiatives, it would be to help people get a business plan to start a business, and that is really, really important and should be invested in. But we need to move to the next level. We need to increase turnover. We need to start trading. We need the sector to grow. So I think there's a piece to hold those champions to account, that in every conversation that's going on in any senior meeting in council or departments are saying, well, we should be including social enterprise. An example of that quickly would be the Invest NI programme. And they've come a long way in their thought process around this, because initially it was, well, we'll set up a training programme for social enterprises. And I said, no, but why should we not be in the main training leadership programme? And I think there's just that feeling that we're different. And in many cases we are, but we should be in the middle of everything as well. And certainly in relation to procurement, I suppose, capability and the ability to be able to win tenders would be an issue. So we need to support social enterprise. So if there was a large tender that came out, we would have the capacity and the confidence and the working capital to be able to deliver on it.
And suppose just from, if I can add to that as well, the councils, there is a private members bill which is currently out for consultation for a social value legislation for Northern Ireland. If we go back to 2017, there was the previous Minister of Finance at that time, Martin O'Mullier, who had, and the procurement board were going to take forward a social value act for Northern Ireland, but due to shortened mandates that has never happened. So we're the only part of the UK that doesn't recognise social value through procurement. So there's a consultation out through Stuart Dixon of the Alliance Party, who's the chair of the all-party group on social enterprise, to bring forward that private members bill. So that, at the moment, and I sat on that reconstituted procurement board that Minister Murphy put in place, and the PPNs that come out of that, there's a lot of work done on that, great work very quickly with different sectors, cross sectors. The public procurement notes will only affect central government. Now, having said that, certain local councils are picking it up and doing great work themselves, but they're not mandated to do it. Neither are universities, who would be also would come under, they don't come under that PPN either. So it's just to try and bring it all together through legislation that we think is important. But councils, our relationship, we have relationships with every individual councils, and we can see some that are forging ahead and some that aren't just as, but that's just the nature of the beast, I suppose. But councils, whenever we speak to them on a face-to-face, are all very supportive of what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is, to May's point as well, we run Social Value Policy Group, which that brings together social enterprises, private sector organisations, public sector, arm's length bodies like Housing Executive are on that, along with the representatives from the councils. So it's to try to bring the thoughts of all sectors into one place to try to help us in taking forward and lobbying on behalf of the sector, what's working, what's not working.
Very useful, thank you very much.
Sinead?
Thank you, and can I thank Dave, Maeve and Colin for their contribution today to the panel. I too want to base my remarks based on what others have said about how we value the social enterprise sector. And I see the creativity and innovation every single day in my own constituency and the work that they do on the ground against the odds sometimes in very challenging environments. So in relation just to the previous conversations, can I ask, public procurement guidance changed in 2022, defining social value and mandating public procurement tenders must include a minimum of 10% of the total award criteria on social value. Has that had a positive impact? And if so, how can we press it to go further?
Maybe if I could pick up on Sinead. The public procurement note was issued 10%, but there was a commitment to reassess that in 2023 to go to 20%. At the time, there was a learning curve to come under, and there wasn't enough understanding, I felt at the time, of and other organisations as well, that not only did the social enterprise sector not particularly understand it, but the public sector didn't really get a hand of it in the private sector. So it was too early to go to increase it from 10. Ultimately, there is the goal that we do increase that, but I think we need to bed it down and to make sure everybody understands it before we try to take it to a higher level. So yes, the public procurement notes were issued, but there is that commitment to take it forward. We see private sector who are approaching us through Meet the Buyer, Meet the Procure events because they want to involve and start including 10%, but they're not mandated to do it at the moment. So they, some of them are doing it, some of them aren't doing it. But I think the challenge is to how can we bring everybody, and the Procurement Act is being launched on the 24th of February, which is actually next week. And whilst it does affect Northern Ireland, there's some parts that are omitted from it, but as far as it doesn't really focus too much on social value, so there's still a need to understand social value before we can take it to the next level. Don't know if anybody else.
I would say from a personal point of view, operating a social enterprise, it has definitely changed things, Sinead. I would say what it's done is opened up the conversation. Once businesses are looking at a tender and they realise they have to score a social value, then they start looking at who they can partner with, and then that's our opportunity to look at the potential there. I would note as well that it's a really improved relationship with CPD, for instance, and the Strategic Investment Board under their social value team as well, helping social enterprises look to develop, and it's a really open conversation about how we utilise public money for social good. So I think we welcome that. The bit for me is still it's the private sector looking at those tenders and seeing how they can collaborate with the third sector around the social piece. we're not really at a stage yet where social enterprises are tendering for significant contracts. And I think that's what we should all be pushing for, so that it's not just the contracts that nobody else wants. And there's still a bit of that, where the private sector don't want them, so we should get social enterprises to look at them. I think we need to be looking at all of the bigger contracts and seeing how can social enterprises be part of that supply chain, because that's where the profit comes from that helps us deliver the purpose. So early days, but it is looking positive.
Yeah, and I think,
sorry, go ahead.
And I think probably one of the things you talk about social partnerships, where social enterprises will work alongside private sector. I think one of the things I alluded to earlier was the skills within the sector. But if we can have private sector operating alongside social enterprises, those skill sets that private sector carry can be used very well by the social enterprise, and they can learn from them. So social partnerships, private sector and social economy businesses can come together to help deliver on public sector contracts in that triangle. So I think that's something that it is moving forward. Our Meet to Procure events, we're definitely getting more interested. Our membership, we're getting more private sector organisations wanting to join, to get in touch with our members as well. So it is moving in the right trajectory, Sinead, I would say.
Well, that's great. And I'm really heartened to hear your experiences on your relationship with InvestNI. That is really, really important. And it's good to hear that positive note that you're not in the outside looking in anymore, you're inside knocking on the doors as well. But just in relation to that, in relation to the skills that you've just mentioned there, InvestNI obviously has confirmed ring fencing took places on the Leader programme for the social enterprise sector starting September. Is that enough?
Yeah.
I think there's Sinead, the risk is that we put too many places in, and one is it weakens the programme of Invest, that it actually loses its value. So for us, it's identifying the social enterprises that are ready for that growth and scale piece. And if we can have it every time they run a programme too, we will work. I think that's the need for then the Intertrade Ireland piece, where that specific focus is then next level. But the key to the procurement question you had is, that's why leadership is key to this, because it's all about matching opportunity with capacity. And if we haven't got the opportunities, then it's really hard to invest in our leaders, to invest in to even go to get loan and all the stuff that's required, because the opportunity's not there. And when the opportunity is there, then we need the capacity, the leadership. And it generally is a leadership thing. The success of our sector, the organisations within our sector that are making real significant impact, it's down to strong leadership, from boards right through to delivery on the ground. And that's why we feel the InvestNI. But I think 2 is ample at the start.
Okay, and just one final question. Is there a role for dual market access in assisting social enterprises? And do you think that the department has seized that opportunity as well?
I don't know that that's completely seized yet.
No, it's a work in progress, I would say at this stage. I was saying it, definitely work in progress.
I think we're probably doing a bit of it individually with enterprises that would be looking at different markets, but I think this is the start of the conversation about that, Sinead, and I think we'll be looking at that relationship building. As Dave said, we need to get into the leadership programmes, we need to look at what support the private sector get for this access, and then we need to make sure social enterprises get the exact same access. But just to reiterate, we're probably at a stage where if we open that door right away, there aren't very many social enterprises at the scale or with the product to avail of that. So both sides have to come together for this to work, and I think both Dave and I are adamant that we'll make this will work, and things will change at the end of it. So we as a sector want to do it right as well. But I think all the conversations are very supportive.
And I suppose just to add that as part of our work programme this year, there was a bit around exporting and encouraging. And we discovered that there's maybe not an awful lot just ready at that stage, because an awful lot of them, a lot of social enterprises, will be locally focused and looking to help their local communities. So the challenge is to how can we actually, there are some very good examples of those that will
backpacks available and some pottery available.
Absolutely.
I see we'll try and get that on camera to make sure we model your backpack there, Dave.
Some great examples, but it is something that people are probably more focused locally on what they're trying to do in their own area rather than that's the next step as well for them, I would say.
But maybe it's that relationship with Invest NI evolves and the skills evolve, that'll be the natural stepping stone.
Yeah, it's a confidence thing as well, Sinead would say, and I think it's probably understanding that some products are delivered locally, but then you can develop other products that you can export and you can sell, and you can look at different markets to it. But if you've been relying quite a lot on local funding, particularly from certain departments, then you haven't really developed products yet, and that's where the opportunity lies.
You, Sinead. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. And look, thank you very much for coming. Gary talked in an earlier session about good news. I think it came through the door because it's been so positive to hear your experiences. I mean, especially whenever we focus on the word profit for purpose. You're absolutely right. Too often in this place, people deride profit. They look at it with a sense of begrudgement and negativity, and in some forms actually jealousy, which is so unfair, because whether it's in social enterprise or whether it's in private business, if you don't have profit, you don't have employment. If you don't have profit, you don't have social value. So many of the companies, particularly that I know Dave from a very local perspective, he's revolutionised how social enterprise is viewed locally because of the social value. But if he doesn't have profitability, he can't make the employment and he can't grow the business. Yep. Colin, I know this has been something you've been involved with, trying to reshape on a broader sort of Northern Ireland-wide basis. Yeah. So I suppose firstly, what I would like to ask is, this action report, very, very helpful, and I think it is right to be framed through the lens of the Department for Economy, because I think that in itself changes how people view social enterprises, and I think that's deliberate and that's important. So firstly, starting with that particular, where's international best practice for this type of enterprise, particularly in delivering profitability with social impact?
I suppose from an international perspective, we regularly attend, or sometimes in person, but sometimes virtually, the Social Enterprise World Forum, which brings together a lot of jurisdictions around the world. Dave actually spoke at one of those events, I think, as well, in Edinburgh. We have locally the closest across in the UK would be Scotland. Mm-hmm. Scotland are so advanced in social enterprise, even ahead of England, I would say, and Wales. And ourselves, because the reason for that really is because they had so much buy-in from government. The Scottish government were so supportive of what social enterprise did. They could see the outputs of what social enterprises can achieve and deliver. So they do have their own challenges, I know that, because we have a good relationship with each of the chief executives in each of the areas, and there was an in-person meeting last couple of weeks ago. But Scotland would be the closest one to us. When we move out of that, you're talking to the likes of the US. I know Maeve's got experience of working with people.
I would say Spain and the Netherlands would have really good models as well.
Yeah, locally the Netherlands is quite strong. Yeah.
And is that building on the profitability aspect to ensure then that the social value is greater?
It's the scaling side of it as well, and the profitability bit, and selling product, I suppose, and then delivering services. The thing I would say would be, I'd like us to be Northern Ireland to be the model of best practice. We have a way to go, but we're small enough and we have enough innovation here to do it. I think what's different in other countries is, and Scotland's a really good model of that, social enterprise was included in their economic policy. Now we're getting to that now with this department, but previously we wouldn't have been. So that idea that social enterprises are part of every economic policy rather than sitting within a social policy is the change that's needed. And then the working capital to get going. People can't scale if they're just doing day-to-day business.
Of course, and if they're able to scale and show more profitability on the longer term, the ability to access finance actually becomes easier because they're more established in themselves. Absolutely. And there's more confidence from the banking institutions to lend and help for further growth. So I get that. Procurement is an issue that's been mentioned, and I'm very interested in the topic of conversation. I suppose probably for me, look, there's huge wastage in the public sector when it comes to procurement. I mean, Emma had a debate yesterday and we touched on it on education, how local companies and local firms could deliver on, basic issues within the school environment, for example, but because they're pushed down a very lengthy, protracted procurement procedure, ultimately, there's huge wastage. So I suppose what I would like to know is, from a social enterprise perspective, the procurement debate, is there the ability to get value for money, particularly given the tight financial circumstances that we find ourselves under right now?
I would say absolutely. It's all about value, because with every product that you sell in, or every service you sell in, there's added value, which is the social value. So that's good value in itself. My own belief is that it's about replacing spend rather than new spend. So if we're creative enough when we're selling into, and my own belief also is that the greatest opportunity is through the private sector who have these contracts. So that's where the legislation and the PPN and stuff is, that actually it's putting private sectors for organisations like ours into a place where they're talking, and we're able to meet the capacity of that, and then the social value comes in that, and actually it's replaced spend. Yeah. It's just replacing spend. We should be working our businesses at competitive prices. We should be doing everything at a competitive way to private. It's the only difference is that the profit the private take for the shareholders is going into our social impact, and I think that's good value.
Yeah. I would maybe add there, it's important to be clear of the difference between procurement and commissioning. Because there is a lot of services, and I run an organisation that does both, delivers services and runs businesses, and some are a hybrid of both. But I think certainly in relation to public spend, what we need to be looking at in commissioning is making sure that the departments aren't trying to deliver everything themselves, and they're creating opportunities to commission services from the private sector and the third sector around that equally. Considering that, so that's one part. Certainly in relation to procurement, it's the same piece. You have to. There is no point in us tendering for work that's at lower than cost. Yeah. You end up with the potential to tender for work where it's going to cost you to deliver it rather than making a profit on it. So I think there has to be something there about understanding that you get what you pay for. And there's a quality element of that, and a trust within our sector, with so many years' experience of delivering excellent results, not to be overly micromanaged in relation to it as well, and look at it as a relationship. So that's where
I see that particularly with like the Department of Education, for example. Like I would see much more value in social enterprise being able to supply into the department, and in particular in school classrooms, where there is I can see clearly that the social element of that is maybe so educational related. Like I think that's where sometimes I think we could really get a good news story from our procurement and from our sort of circular economy that we're not getting. The final point from me would be, so obviously I think it's absolutely right that this report has been, from an economy perspective, led, and I think that's good for a number of reasons, but obviously you can't get away from the fact that this crosses so many different departments. And actually agreed with the Chair's earlier comments as well, even about when we look at different departments having a role in whether it's community ownership. That's so important when it comes to the really social fabric in a community. But on the particular of recent job statistics show record unemployment, and you know what? That means nothing now, because the level of economically inactive in the country is totally masking, what the unemployment figures are. Social enterprises have the ability, in my opinion, to really pinpoint accuracy target those economically inactive. There's an ability for them to enter into those workplaces far easier than the traditional workplace. So I see a real opportunity space there. So what I want to know is what conversations are being had, or what direction could be had to ensure that social enterprise are at the forefront of tackling this huge issue that we have in the Northern Ireland economy.
Around economic inactivity. Yeah. It's an interesting one because it sits slightly outside your department. Now Group supports people with disabilities with about 1,800 people on our books, and there's a range of amazing organisations in the sector doing amazing work. We'll support 350 people into paid jobs this year, but there isn't anywhere where there's a conversation going about how we could do more of that. And I note the Chair's previous point, and he's heard me mention this many times, around we're relying on UK SPF funding to buoy that up at the minute, but there has to be an appreciation that could be scaled and that could be delivered more significantly in social enterprises and charities and vulnerable organisations have a role to play in that. I think sometimes what happens when we're looking at the different departments, they're not sure where it sits, and I think that's the case with a number of different initiatives that go across it. But our sector overall and the committee are sitting ready to do more of it. Somebody just needs to ask us how do we do it, and then put the money behind getting
huge
it
overlap with DFC and the Department of Economy, and this particularly on jobs and benefits and trying to get people back into the workplace. Is the opportunity is vast.
Yeah, one of the things that we have noticed, obviously, in our role is that you take what social enterprises do, like basically everything. They touch every government department, like justice are involved, and your health's involved, education. So our suppose what I'd be thinking about is I would love somebody sitting at a perm sec level who would be that person responsible for driving all that together. And pulling those. There is a group which has existed from time to time called the Social Economy Policy Group, which is made up of a representative from each government department, plus a couple of arm's length bodies. That sort of was stepped down probably last year, and I'd be very keen. I'm now speaking to those individuals myself individually to try to bring them back together again, because I do think that the strength in all of this is every government department working together and pulling this, but I think it nearly needs somebody sitting at a level who takes responsibility at the sort of, it's some senior level anyway, who will take responsibility for what are these departments doing amongst, rather than doing them individually, because you end up in silo approaches, which is the risk.
And to add to that point, there's a technical barrier within departments, and I think it's good for this committee to know that say for instance a department had an issue and they wanted to deliver a pilot or they wanted to deliver an opportunity, there's only two ways they can fund it. One is to set up a funding programme that's a competitive process, or the other one is to do it through a framework. And you'll note in our paper that we've looked at frameworks because social enterprises aren't in those frameworks. So therefore, if you went as a social enterprise to pitch to deliver an initiative that might help with one of those departments, you can't because they don't have a vehicle to fund you for it. So I think we need to be looking at the flexibility in relation to frameworks. This department initiative, particularly around the skills agenda and the skills framework and how we ensure more social enterprises are in that supply chain, but then other departments as well. Because with the best will in the world, we can pressurise departments to do it, but then one of us goes and says we've got an idea, and then there's no way to fund it. So I think there needs that relationship with social enterprise has to be more about procurement, frameworks, tendering like we have with the private sector, than just waiting on a fund being developed, although they're important too for the third sector. But you need both, so that what you want to happen actually can happen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to you all. I suppose Johnny's point there at the very outset of his contribution around the good news, and that is, like, it's nice to hear a group coming in and telling us very clearly there are objectives here. They have got a time deadline on them, and we think we're going to meet them. We're working towards them. So I'm feeling the positivity. I suppose looking at the briefing paper around what the group are doing in the co-design plan. Others have referenced the work that goes on in their own constituencies. I was heartened to see Georgina from Workspace is on the co-design panel, and I know that the work that they do in our local area in South Derry is just unbelievable, and the community aren't aware of that. They're benefiting from it and they're feeling it, but they're not even aware of how it's operating, and the full extent of it is just it's mad. So all of that in terms of the drive that's there, and that self-starter sort of mentality and people actually delivering for their local community is something I think we should see a whole lot more of. So I suppose I don't really have a question as such. I feel heartened. Reading the paper, I was like, this all seems so positive. Where is the catcher? Where is the fall down going to be? But I'm relieved to hear from your contributions today that it is as positive as it looks. And I suppose your ask you outlined at the start, Dave, is that you want us to support, and anything I can do personally, definitely I'm on board there, because as I say, I see it in real life how it operates on the ground, and I couldn't be more positive around that.
Warwick West is a brilliant example of the enterprise part,
Yes.
because we found out through this process of their even in taking on it, buying a business,
Yep.
that they just run as a profit-making business, and then the profit's going back into their local community.
Yep.
And nobody had really seen that or thought of that around the table of acquiring a private business and turning into a social enterprise. So there was a lot of learning that we had, and there's great opportunities to do that.
And I suppose, not to bang the drum of Middlester too much, but I suppose that they have been recognised, like Patsy McShane achieved an award there at the beginning of the year for the work that he has done, and the whole board and the team there. But even it ties into the conversation we were having yesterday around the issues within schools. Even getting equipment, Workspace are providing iPads, technology to all the local schools on a regular basis, and that's the real life benefit that everybody's able to attain from that.
We had one of our sessions in Workspace in Derbystown, so it was great to hear from Jordina and the team. And I think, as Dave says, even the fact that they've bought a business in England and they're using that, saying, as a Mahara woman, it's nice for me to see that happen as well, because I had many family members who started their career in Workspace. We just want to see that in every area, and we want to see that entrepreneurialness, but not every community has the self-starting thing there. We need to be able to do it. You need the right board, the right entrepreneur leading it, and you need working capital to get going, and you need opportunities to do business. And I think that's the bit that we're trying to urge through this group.
And that was actually the Social Enterprise Northern Ireland Awards last November that awarded Patsy McShane. Patsy was absolutely delighted with what he had got, and I think half of the town must have been up that night because there was so many people.
All of it, I would say.
Probably all at it, but just to back that up, Jonathan asked earlier about exemplars, and we talked about countries, but sometimes we think people in Northern Ireland, I know when I'm out talking to other jurisdictions, I think it's a Northern Ireland thing that we think we have to learn from everybody else, but we have so much expertise here that we can actually, all our people are saying, well, wow. And to your point about Workspace, not only did they win the Northern Ireland Social Enterprise of the Year, they went to London in December and were amazingly awarded the UK Social Enterprise of the Year. So that recognition, not only for them, but for the sector in Northern Ireland and what we're doing and how positive things are. So I think, talking about exemplars, the people we have leading social enterprise in Northern Ireland, I'd put them up against anybody else. I'd put them up against private sector because they have so much to deal with that private sector don't have to deal with, and trying to balance that social and economic outcome. So we do have exemplars, individuals and organisations, but the Workspace should be congratulated for putting Northern Ireland on the map. There's your Mid-Ulster plug for Anna.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation this morning. I mean, it is a really positive, good news story, as I've just said, and I do think, social economy needs to be more in the everyday conversation, everyday vocabulary, to raise, more awareness of the good it's doing and the good it can do further. But and we've touched on a few points earlier about the challenges and the access to finance, capital, and so on. And I do note in the report you said that the reform programme for the credit unions has been identified, and have you had engagement with credit unions, and how is that reform, how will it impact on the social economy in terms of the tiers of funding available? Not through this committee, I don't think, but I know Social Enterprise NI have.
Yeah, we have a very good relationship with the Irish League of Credit Unions, and in fact, going back to our annual awards, we'll give that another plug. We have great interest from credit unions in applying. We have some fantastic organisations, credit unions, the size and scale, but not only that, the social impact that credit unions can have. We've spoke to credit unions for a long time, and I know they are restrictive in their lending. Having come from used to work in the banking circles, I know that the FSA and the PRA are very restrictive in what they're allowing credit unions to do, and I think there's a bit of work going on to try to change that, to try to make, because you've got credit unions who are creating so much social impact, but they're not actually allowed to lend it to social enterprises. And I think there's a bit of work to be that. I know it's ongoing through our conversations with the Irish League, but it's just sort of the red tape
to safeguard them as well, obviously.
Yeah, it's obviously it's a big thing to do, but if we could just sort of crack that one and enable credit unions to be supportive of the social economy of which they're part of, it would make a huge difference.
Last but by no means least, David.
No, cheers, thank you all for coming. Absolutely lovely idea. I spend a couple of hours every now and again with Dave, who upgraded our van to Lagan Valley recently. So we have some great examples: Stepping Stones, Live Life, everything in my own area, and they do such a phenomenal work. I suppose just a lot have been covered, but I just want to pick out a couple of little things to try and grow. It kind of come from that business world. Sort of, you have an idea, you develop a product or a service, you then have to have a market for it, you need finance to deliver it, and you deliver it. It's kind of that circle, and if you break any point of that, you don't have a business, and it's exactly the same as social enterprise. I suppose there's an issue around language, I think, and your first priority is awareness of the sector, and you have social value, you have social license, you have social enterprise as well. All of that sort of models people's kind of view. But see, the 10%, I'm just interested in that 10% of public procurement. What is that at 10% now? Has that been delivered?
It's the 10% is in relation to the scoring on a contract.
Okay.
So so any tender that's been tendered, they'll be scored 10% of the overall 100% will be scored for social value, and the private sector can oftentimes meet that themselves. In relation
that's my
to
next
their
question. So that was where I was going with that.
Yeah.
So that's not actually creating a space that you can trade, if you like.
No,
a private
it's not
company
10% of social enterprises.
No, it's not. It's sort of, but it's creating opportunities, I suppose, is the way it's doing at the moment. The scoring of that is being monitored by Strategic Investment Board, and they do that regularly. So that's where a lot of monitoring bit goes around.
No, simple. Well, I just wanted to pull that out. So a private company or just a self-employed guy or whoever, a small business, can still show the social value. So that doesn't create. I said at the start, you have a product, you have a market, you have a finance. So you're not actually creating the market within. That doesn't actually.
It doesn't ensure that you're creating a market.
So how do we help you create a bigger market?
I mean, the biggest part of social value in the scoring is job creation, and the impact that it has within the community. So if you take the construction industry, it's about the job creations within where the build is. And so construction companies will hire people from those communities themselves. So that's often bypasses social enterprise. But I from the few that I work with, I know that the challenge is always hard to get the scoring. So there's opportunity, lots and lots and lots of opportunities. I don't think that the companies can deliver all the score points. But again, there's nothing stopping a private company coming in and doing something social and helping them score that.
And I would say that what can happen, and that would be a concern of the sector. So you could agree to do a number of initiatives and score really well, and then SIB's role is to go back and audit that and make sure that you're delivering on what you said you did. I think back to my previous point around social value and the scoring, there's two elements to it. One would be that the private sector writes that in and says they're going to partner with one of our organisations or a social enterprise to deliver the social value, and then you need to make sure they do, and there's an opportunity out of it. But really it should also encourage social enterprises to tender for that work ourselves rather than somebody else doing it. So where we need support is for departments to take seriously and encourage bids where it would be private and social enterprises maybe collaboratively bidding on it, rather than us being the recipient of the initiatives that come out of a tender won by a private sector. I do think there is an appetite with the private sector to collaborate with social enterprises on joint bids as well. We just need to make sure as a sector that we're commercially savvy enough to get revenue out of that and not end up being bid candy. Which would be a risk in relation to this.
One of the things we've noticed is that, particularly with tenders, what we're trying to do is develop social partnerships. So we have noticed that private sector, if you're based in a certain area, will basically look up and say, well, let's see what a social enterprise, and they'll put names into a contract or into a bid who they've never even spoken to, but they know that they're there. But what we're trying to do is, through our Meet the Procure, Meet the Buyer and our directory that we have now of all social enterprises in Northern Ireland, is try to ensure that there's a relationship built up through the social value policy group, but there's a relationship built up before that's actually submitted, that they know what exactly that organisation is, rather than just picking a postcode, looking up a social enterprise and sticking it in as somebody that we can include in our contract, which we haven't noticed before.
You're bringing a value to it. It's back to the start with Philip, Philip talked about North Belfast, West Belfast as the, or the sort of the regional balance, and I'm agreeing with regional balance. But whenever you do it as a broad kind of like brush, where you've the areas within the greater Belfast area that are actually the most deprived, and you've got the people furthest from the workforce, you're actually creating the opportunity. It's how you create that opportunity for them that, in North, even if I come to Lagan Valley, we have a lot of people wealthy, but we've actually very little jobs in the area. So it's how all of that then ties together, and then that brings me on to how do you talked a little bit about scaling, and I constantly talk in here about scaling. So if you've got something that's working well, I constantly say it, but we don't seem to take what's working well and scale. Yeah. So the barrier to that, is it finance, or what is the barrier to?
I think it's I personally think it's, yes, finance is a big part. It's leadership, which is what we've identified. But I also think it's part of our own restrictions we put as a wee place here, in that doing a lot of work in the UK mainland. That what happens is that if we were to be running there and if I had started social enterprise there, we'd probably be 4 or 5 times the size, just because of the amount of people, the population density, but also there's a sense of we're probably one of the most innovative countries in the world, but actually we then have a limiting factor that whenever we get to that £500,000, we struggle to get beyond it, and we're not as good, or we're not. So I think part of it is the limitations to growth. We're don't put your head too far above the.
I think that's a cultural thing.
I think that's there's a cultural thing there. So the only way you get through that is you create great leaders who are prepared to step out and be entrepreneurial and believe in their innovations. And then you get, as a country, you see the opportunities. And for us, that's what Invest NI creates, an opportunity to be exporting that. But that's where we've got to get this all working, because then the opportunities are immense. 80% of my own business goes outside of Northern Ireland because we couldn't sustain it just here. But it comes through strong leadership, competing with. But then there's the other challenges that limits growth in the social enterprise space, where when you start growing, you end up having to run 2 things. So you've got charity leadership and also business leadership. And if you're just in the business world, you're working on your profits, you're working on your product, you're working on that, and everything's a business meeting, where half my week is about talking to local authorities, trusts, and you're trying to do that. That impacts growth, and yet you haven't got the finances to bring a whole squad of extra people in, because then you've no profit. So those are the challenges of growth, I think, within our sector. One is the limiting factor, finance, the leadership piece, and then this social enterprise space where we're trying to lead to different areas.
It's that balance between driving the social aspect of it and driving the economic aspect of it too. We're trying to do both together.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I would say I agree totally with the speakers, but I think if we're going to change that, and that's what we're in the business of doing, there's 2 things that need to change. One is the departments need to start talking to social enterprises about delivering impact, rather than, I in many cases, when I go to talk about needing investment or funding, I'll be asked, what is it you're looking for now? That's not the relationship that we need to have with social enterprises. We need to say, you're doing an amazing job, how can we help you do more? Yeah. That's the conversation that has to happen. But we've been in a historic relationship within the third sector and social enterprise sector, where we're waiting to get things given to us rather than being part of the solution. Until that changes, it's a very difficult environment to work in. The other thing I would say is we need to start supporting social enterprises to win some big commercial contracts. We don't have any. We've maybe one. And even when we look at CPD, who've been really supportive in this area, and that wasn't always the case, so it's been brilliant, and the team are leading that very well. Even to get examples and case studies is a struggle, because they're not at scale. So when we're starting to look at the money government spending, we need to start to see social enterprises delivering it.
Where does that support come from? Does that come from our Department of Economy? Is that, where does that?
Finance in the procurement side at CPD into finance.
Yeah, but is that where does what? I'm just trying to nail it down to how do we get?
Well, no, your power is
yeah.
within your spending power in your department.
Look at this building. How specifically do we allow that to happen? What is it that needs to allow that to happen, to allow a business to come in and scale and win a contract like that? What's the support you need?
Yeah, well, I would say we'd be looking at a number of the contracts that are coming up that are really commercially viable and encouraging the department to look at social enterprises winning it. There is potential for reserve contracts, which means that you don't actually have to go outside social enterprises for that. Now, it doesn't suit all social enterprises because not all are eligible for it, but it would mean that it would be sending a certain message around how you want to do business in the future. And I think they're usually reserved for contracts that are quite small or not viable for the private sector. They should be the most commercially viable ones to really move things on. And I think the other piece would be around the frameworks, of the money that's been spent. How do we encourage more social enterprises to be there? That only gives you an opportunity to tender in for work, and you're on a list where you have the opportunity to do it. And if you're not on the list, and the list's locked for 5 years, then you've got a sector who can't bid for work at the moment.
The recent, we've been talking to the Education Authority recently, and they have just launched a 4-year pipeline, which is great.
Very welcome, yeah.
Because social enterprises are innovative, they're entrepreneurial, and I know there are cases where something maybe outside their core business that they're able to plan to do differently and allow to expand. So that 4-year pipeline has been great to see that coming through. So more of that would be useful as well.
Yeah. As Johnny said, two things sort of stand out to me: that cultural, wider than sort of just as a culture or mindset sort of change that needs to happen, and then Johnny was saying earlier on about bringing the productivity figures, if you like, that we've got, so people furthest from our job unemployment might be really, really low, but it's insignificant because we've a massive productivity issue. So, and the role of social enterprise to change that is massive. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We really appreciate your time, and I think it's important that we recognise that you all give of your time freely to be involved in this. You have businesses and important work outside of this, but thank you very much for your dedication, and I wish you both continued success. And as a North Belfast man, Colin, even wish the Glens well as well.
Congratulations on the announcement.
Yes, thank you very much.
No doubt you'll support us in whatever we're doing as well.
You'll be getting 10 million, no doubt, so thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Messages you get from constituents.
Hey colleagues, just a couple of things I wanted to potentially seek agreement that we should look at doing. So members will recall from my remarks on behalf of the committee on Monday during the spring supplementary debate, there is a huge amount of underspent FTC, not just within the Department for the Economy but across the executive as a whole, and we may wish to flag to the Minister that obviously the ongoing work to support social enterprise, the Department should look at how they better utilise FTC to support that sector if they're content on that. We may at some stage wish to get raised to do some useful research for us in relation to how the social enterprise economy works in Scotland in particular, but also in the Netherlands, US and Spain, just to see if there's any best practice that we could learn from that. And there was mention of the Social Economy Policy Group. I'd be keen just to find out a bit more detail about that if members are content.
Yep.
Okay, does anybody have anything else? Peter, did I miss anything?
Members do also just want to write the department, it's going to be the Minister, asking about FTC, also asking if there is what they're going to do by way of flexibility around the frameworks, particularly the skills framework, to allow social enterprises to bid into that and to look for alternative funding channels. And also the group seemed to mention some statistics that are being done by QUB and Middlesex University. Presumably that's being commissioned by the department, so we could ask them about that. And then additionally to write to the co-design group indicating the committee's support, but also I think the member had asked for an update on the social enterprise champions.
Yeah, just so we can know who they are and support them.
That'd be useful. And the Department of Finance are currently engaged in a review of procurement at the minute and values of contracts, etc. So it's just something to look out for in terms of ensuring that social value and social enterprise has a role in all of that. Okay, colleagues, thank you. We'll now move to item 8, which is the Northern Ireland Tourism Alliance 10-year Tourism Action Plan and Vision, and we are delighted to be joined, and apologies for keeping you waiting.
It's okay, no
It's
problem
great to
at
see
all.
you both again. We have Nuala and we have Joanne. You are both very, very welcome here today. Members are particularly interested in the vital role that the tourism sector plays right across Northern Ireland, and what we as a committee can do to continue to support your growth and expansion. So we'll hand over to you at this stage.
Thank you very much, Chair. And what we'd just like to do is make a few opening comments. Obviously, we sent through the briefing, so we're not going to go through all of that, but just some points that we wanted to bring out. So I said, I'm Joanne Stewart, CEO of the Northern Ireland Tourism Alliance. We were established in 2018 as the industry-led voice for tourism in Northern Ireland, and our membership would span all of the subsectors of economy, of the tourism economy. So everything obviously in visitor attractions, tour guides, through to transport, etc. I think, as you said, tourism is one of the most important indigenous industries, and it is really a prime driver of job creation across the region of Northern Ireland. And it's very much about taking the best of what we have, so our landscapes, our heritage, our culture, and really packaging that up as a way of promoting to people to come and spend some time in Northern Ireland. And I think what that enables tourism to do is really help the growth of other sectors within the economy. So when people come over here, they're spending time in restaurants, obviously staying in hotels, they're shopping. So actually tourism drives that growth of some of our more domestic sectors. So for example, in 2019, 24% of the spend was spent in hospitality, on food and drink, and a further 25% was spent in accommodation. So it drives the growth of other sectors. The latest figures that we have sort of for a full year are 2023, and I've set those out. And tourism was worth 1.2 billion to the economy in Northern Ireland. That was from overnight stays, so people who are coming up and staying overnight. 50% of that was export-led, so that's from people from outside of Northern Ireland, and that means that we are bringing new money into the economy. NISRA are also doing quarterly reporting, so the last one we have is to the end of June 2024. So we're sort of similar stage as we would have been in 2023, but now what they're capturing is the money that is generated through day trips, which is something that we've always said is underestimated in Northern Ireland. So at the end of June, the total visitor spend was actually 2 billion, so 1.15 billion from overnights, and then a further 1 billion from day trips, which is, again, just shows the impact we have on tourism. One of the great things that we've seen with the reformation of the Executive and the Assembly has been the creation of the Tourism Partnership Board by the previous Economy Minister. Nuala and myself are both members of that, and then obviously contributed to the development of the 10-year Tourism Vision and Action Plan. And I think this really has provided much needed recognition of the importance to tourism, to driving forward the economic vision that Conor Murphy set out, and ambitious, I think, given the current sort of environment and economic environment that we're within, to grow the tourism to 2 billion from overnights and 1.5 billion from day trips, so a total of 3.5 billion to the Northern Ireland economy. I just wanted Nuala to come in and just give you a little bit about ITOA, and some of you may not have come across them before.
Good morning, thank you. So my name is Nuala Saul, Managing Director of BRAC Tours Northern Ireland, and I'm based in Newry, County Down, and I'm delighted to be here today. I am also the current President of the Inbound Tourism Operators Association of Ireland, that's the Island of Ireland. And we are the representative association of Ireland's premier inbound tour operators, DMCs, handling agents and PCOs. Our 34 members design, package, creative programmes and itineraries for escorted tours, individual travel, holiday makers, business tourists, and also including incentive corporate meetings and conferences. So the ITOA is the recognised representative association of Ireland's leading based tour operators, and our 34 members delivered 699,000 overseas visitors to the island of Ireland in 2024, spending 299.2 million with Irish tourism businesses across the island. ITOA members have worked tirelessly for decades promoting Northern Ireland overseas, and we work closely with our colleagues of Tourism Northern Ireland and Tourism Ireland and the wider tourism industry in ensuring the inclusion of all regions across Northern Ireland in the packaged programmes that we deliver and the activities that we promote to our international trade partners globally. These include extensive leisure, group and FIT, which is the free independent travel, packaged holiday programmes, as well as the MICE, which is the Meetings Incentive Conference Business programmes as well. So there's a broad range of the tourism programmes that we collectively bring from our members.
Okay. And I just wanted to just touch on a couple of the challenges and then obviously have a discussion. So in the briefing, you'll have seen that we have recently done a survey with our members, and that's based on performance for 2024. And really, it's sort of mixed. There's some doing okay, and then there's some that aren't doing that well. I think what's interesting is that there has been an increase in overseas visitors, which has offset a decline in domestic tourism. So overall, we're looking similar, but actually the sort of the breakdown of the markets is changing. Obviously, rising costs are an issue, and I'll touch on that. But also, I think what came out was a mixed trust from businesses in the Northern Ireland Executive and Assembly's ability to support tourism. And I think the Tourism Partnership Board and the vision has gone some way to showing the industry that tourism is important, but I think we've more work to do to make sure industry feel that they are able to contribute to that. So really just three areas I wanted to bring up. So rising costs of doing business, the impact of the UK autumn statement is going to hit, obviously, in April. And that, what the feedback that we're getting on that is that this is really going to impact on the ability for businesses to continue to recruit and to invest in the business due to the significant increase that the national insurance contributions and the living wage increases will have. I also think it's a bit of a double whammy for businesses in that it's also impacting on the departments here. It'll impact on Tourism NI, so they will all have to use more of their budget to cover those increased costs, which means that there will be less to be allocated to actually the public services. The UK government have said that they have set money aside to mitigate that, but there is no clarity on how that's going to work, and our department's going to be given more budget. I also think the regional dispersal of visitors and spend, so Nuala will talk to this as well later, but 66% of our visitor spend is outside of Belfast. Now, it's really important that Belfast is the main gateway into Northern Ireland, so what we need to do is how we maintain that, but at the same time provide the ability for us to get more of the visitors to go around Northern Ireland. And this will be something, again, one of the actions from the action plan was about the development of destination stewardship plans, so where we're looking at sort of destination hubs and how you grow that. But I think one thing I was talking to Nuala about the tour operators, there's definitely more confidence out there about Northern Ireland and about the ability to spend more time in Northern Ireland because we have the product and the experiences. There's definitely pent-up demand, but our concern is that that's going to be impacted by the next challenge, which is the impact of the electronic travel authorisation and ETA. And that is a permission to travel that you have to apply for if you're coming into the UK, obviously including Northern Ireland. And where the impact primarily is those that are travelling from the Republic of Ireland to Northern Ireland and crossing the land border. The cost is £10 per person, and it's rising to £16, which probably will be in time for the Europeans to come on board. And if we use the latest figures as at the end of June, when you look at the overseas, so this does not include GB, obviously overseas travellers who are spending either a day in Northern Ireland or spending overnight, there's 560 million that is potentially at risk if people decide that they don't want to bother to get an ETA. The bigger issue we're seeing recently is with the EU citizens coming on board. A lot of them still travel with an EU ID card, and you will need to get a passport to apply for an ETA. And actually the bureaucracy and administrative challenges that people have to get a passport in their own European country, and the cost of that is definitely, we are starting to see some examples of where that is impacting. Actually, Nuala, you've got some anecdotal feedback on that.
I do, yes. Thank you, Joanne. Yes, the ITOA is highlighting our concerns raised by the operators and our members that work with the German market about the requirement now to have a passport to apply for this ETA, so tourists all travelling to Northern Ireland. And the concerns, they relate to the fact that many Germans don't have a passport applying for one, and can be very bureaucratic and expensive as a process, as Joanne highlighted. Germans can use an identity card for all European destinations. The European Union of Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, but not the United Kingdom. Our members and operators are saying that needing a passport to travel to the UK is definitely having an impact on tours when programmed, which previously would have come to Northern Ireland. And one of the leading German operators bringing tourists to Ireland in the past, they would have taken approximately 25,000 visitors per year to an Ireland programme across the different tours, which were also included visits in Northern Ireland. They would have included maybe stops along the causeway and a few other places, but now they only offer tours to the Republic. So already it's very visible that the Northern Ireland is being dropped out of tour packages and itineraries from our members and also overseas international tour planners, travel agents and other operators. And that is not just for the German market, in fact.
And the thing to remember is that the Europeans can still travel to the south with an EU ID card. So it means that they then have an opportunity to spend their whole time in the south. We are working on two elements, which I'm sure the committee are aware of. So we have been and are still making the case for an exemption, particularly for those tourists who are travelling across the land border. One, they may not be aware of it. Two, they may decide that they don't want to come because of the cost and the sort of hassle factor. And so we are trying to get an exemption, working with the department. Obviously, Conor Murphy took that up, and we're meeting with the new Minister, Kiva, in a few weeks. And then the other side is we're sort of two strands, so we're doing that, but we're also at the same time, we have to be aware we may not get the exemption. So we are working with the Home Office. We have worked with them to revise the messaging so it's more specific to Northern Ireland, uses the language that we use. We changed the UK map as well so that, Northern Ireland was shown as its own island. So, just again, how that all comes together. And we also have just finished 2 webinars with the Home Office where we had over 400 people from tourism businesses to educate them on ETA. And actually we got a significant number of questions in that, which we are compiling. And again, I'll let the committee have a copy of that. So hopefully that just give you a few, just a bit of an intro into the areas that we're talking about.
Thank you very much indeed for that. So, Joanne, you are a membership organisation, so you're totally self-funded, is that right?
Yes, we do receive some support from TNI and TI as strategic partners, but the majority of our income is from membership.
Yeah, and I think that gives a much more authentic voice to what you say, is that you are the living and breathing example of your members who pay to be part of this organisation and day and daily create jobs and opportunities throughout Northern Ireland. I'm just keen to get your sense of your interaction with Tourism Northern Ireland and its competency. So they've recently just launched their new toolkit / campaign for this year, and I don't say this for a party political point, but if I'm visiting Northern Ireland and I go on Tourism Northern Ireland's website and I click on their marketing campaign, visiting the Republic of Ireland on their website comes up before visiting Northern Ireland. And I don't say that as a party political point. I make this as representatives of businesses in Northern Ireland. You're taxpayers in Northern Ireland, and your funding is going to promote other destination tourism visitors. So I just want to check your view in terms of your relationship with Tourism Northern Ireland.
Well, we have good relationships with Tourism Northern Ireland and Tourism Ireland, and we work with them, but we also provide a challenge function on behalf of industry. Both are observers on our board, and we have monthly meetings. Obviously, we've meetings all the time, but we have specific monthly meetings where our chair and myself meet with the CEO, and we also have that with the department as well. T&I have responsibility for promoting Northern Ireland, obviously within Northern Ireland, but also within the Republic of Ireland. And the Republic of Ireland obviously is an important market for us, which may be why that has. I haven't seen that on
just
there.
Encourage you to have a
but
look
it is
at
something
it,
that I will look at.
Yeah.
But their campaigns will be focused in obviously Republic of Ireland, but also in the domestic market as well. And certainly we have seen an increase in the visitors from the Republic of Ireland spending time in Northern Ireland, and I think it's one of the benefits actually from the pandemic, where more people from the south came up and actually realised that we have moved on. There's a lot of good product, and so we have seen a growth in that. So it's an important market. But I certainly will have a look at that and take it on.
Perfect, 100%. Secondly, just in relation to some of the tourism action plan or vision,
yep.
So the sub-regional destination stewardship plans,
yes.
To try to get that all out at once. So the department has produced their draft budget allocations, which they gave to the committee last week, and one of the greatest cuts that the department are proposing is in their budget for tourism for next year, which from my perspective is disappointing. So I'm just wondering, have you had any correspondence or discussions with the department about what they're actually proposing to put in the budget for this action plan in the next financial year?
No, we haven't, and we haven't seen the draft allocations now. I've been in contact with the department to ask when they would be available, but also was there a consultation on the department? Obviously, we've got the draft budget, but there's no detail in that for us. I do think this also comes back to the increased costs that the department and Tourism and I are having to cover, and that will impact and flow down onto what they have available for business support and promotional activities. I would be concerned if there's a significant, obviously, decrease in that, and that's something that we will follow up on, because we're facing a lot of challenges, as I know the whole of the executive and departments are, but we do have an opportunity. There has been increased funding to Tourism Ireland, which means that we can't afford to drop the ball with regards to making sure that Northern Ireland is on the agenda for people to come and visit. But we are waiting to see more detail from the department on their budget allocations.
Every department's under pressure, but we have a settlement next year of £18.6 billion, the largest settlement that Northern Ireland has ever had in its history. So always push back on ministers, because they're quick to say we don't have much money, and listen, we'll all fight for more money, but it's also important to realise the money that we have and to use it better. In terms of finally then the action plan itself, you all gave freely of your time to be involved in this, to feed into this. Have you, since its publication, have you had follow-up meetings with the department about what they're starting to implement from this? Because we had the social enterprise sector in previously, and the point that I was making was documents are great, but it's actual delivery. You could be sitting in your business continuing to work on the struggles that you're facing, but you're giving of your time to try and lift the entire sector. Are you seeing change within the department in terms of trying to now deliver some of the items within their action plan?
Yes, we are, and I've been involved recently. T&I are leading on the development of the event strategy, so they have been consulting with industry. They're also consulting on the skills action plan, so we've been involved in that. Obviously, the department and the minister are continuing to work with us with regards to an exemption for ETA. There is a grouping that is looking at the whole area of peace tourism, so there's definitely progress being made in Tourism Ireland. Obviously, as I said, did receive some additional funding to that core funding for their promotional activity. So it is moving on, and I know the department are currently just working out how this will be monitored going forward, and we are, I think, due to get together just at the start of the new financial year.
Can I just say as well on top of that, Joanne, which I failed to probably tell you as well, is last week I took part in a meeting with the FEI, which is the festival events organisers, and that was to gain feedback from our members. So 4 of our key members sat on that hour-long meeting, and I can tell you it would have happened probably 3 weeks ago, only my availability wasn't there. So they were very, very keen to really get the inside, the international tour operators' sense of what is needed to bring these large key events to Northern Ireland. Sorry, I forgot.
No, it's great.
No, thank you so much. Okay, Emma.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks to you both for the presentation. I suppose very concerned around the ETA and what you've outlined there. I was heartened to see the figures, 66% spent outside Belfast. I know within our own area, members of this committee are going to be sick hearing about Mid-Ulster. But
trust me, it's a welcome relief. What? It exists?
It's just change of somewhere else.
So, this is very dairy heavy, this committee. But I know that in our own area, there's a focus at the minute around tourism. We very aware that you refer there to the hospitality spend and the overnight stays. And our hotels locally rely on business people and maybe weddings for the vast majority of their visits, and that's something that they're actively trying to change. And I've been working with a group locally who are a fantastic product to offer and are doing brilliant work, but they are relating to me and have been for some time. There are very serious concerns around this ETA, as well as the VAT harmonisation piece as well, and the fact that we are so close to the border region. And even we've heard hoteliers and tourism operators in Donegal and other parts of the west of Ireland saying very clearly, if people are coming to Derry or Tyrone, it's a 20-minute drive to get into Donegal or Sligo. So I take the Chair's point, but the reality is we're on a tiny island, and if you've got overseas visitors coming here, you want them to come to all 32 counties, and there's an opportunity to do that in a very real sense, and we shouldn't be putting barriers, or we shouldn't allow barriers to be put in their place.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing I would see just with Mid-Ulster is, there's a lot of work around the literature side of things. Obviously with Seamus Heaney, I know there's an upcoming sort of week of food celebration, and these are things that really do attract people in and give some reasons to go. But as you say, this is why we really are working hard to try and get an exemption. And actually, one of the suggestions I would have for the committee is that you would write to the Minister for Migration and Citizenship, Seema Malhotra, who is responsible for the ETA and the UK government. Have you? And invite her to give evidence to the committee, because that is really important. Do you want to add it?
Yeah, I'm also a proud Mid-Ulster lady originally.
That's 2 in a row there. That's presentation.
But just also on that, and a few examples even from my own experience in tour programme, and you're very correct, we're a very small island, and our members market the island of Ireland. We would have, say for example, if we had clients in a 2 or 3 night stay in Dundalk or Carlingford region, their touring for their day tours would be planned to incorporate various regions all of Northern Ireland. And for example, taking the Carlingford ferry, which goes from Greenore over to Greencastle, and we continue touring on to Kilkeel and Newcastle and do the loop around back into Newry-Mourns and Slieve Gullion and Strangford Geopark. So all of those regions, just from perhaps staying in the Carlingford or Dundalk area, they would be affected. So, you know, there's an easy solution for our members, and that is that they could quite simply change and have them stay and explore Ireland's ancient East. It's the hassle factor, it's the uncertainty, and it really does, you know, the travel and tourism industry have been through enough during COVID, and all of these things, and another barrier to go up can really, the damage is going to be, I suppose we won't know the extent of the damage until it's too late.
And I think one of the challenges is there are people who travel currently on an EU ID card. There are no checks, there are no immigration checks, there is not any sign of any border control, or so. And you know, so people, the chance of people being stopped is very small. However,
you can't advocate.
The legal consequences, you're now treated as an illegal alien, so the actual legal consequences have now been legislated for, and as responsible businesses, we have to ensure that nobody would be at risk of ending up in that situation, which is why this is causing such an issue for us, compared to when the EU ID card was removed as a valid form of identity. But so we can't take the risk that they're not going to be stopped. So.
Yeah, that on board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank
Sorry, you were taking a sip of water. Apologies.
Joanne, I heard you speak at the British Parliamentary Assembly last year, and actually my colleague said when he saw in the pack that you were coming, he said Joanne's going to be there, because I send that speech to everyone. It's such a good outline of the issues that we face in terms of our tourism and the opportunities. And so I want to pick up on some of the things that you talked about then and see where we are now. We've talked about the ETA. You warned that it would be disastrous for Northern Ireland. And I suppose also from your perspective, Nuala, there's work that we're doing. We absolutely have to have an exemption and work on messaging. But how are tour operators adapting to this?
They're adapting. They're immediately, we see the evidence, they're changing itineraries. They've done that we're programming now for, 2025 is done. 2026 is being programmed now on itineraries, which goes to international markets. So I know I referred to about the German market, but one of the largest markets to the island of Ireland and to Northern Ireland with a pent-up desire to come here is the North American market. So how are our members adapting? They're changing itineraries. They're dropping Northern Ireland off it. It's very clear and visible. And my fear is that the extent of the damage is going to be very hard to reverse. So we do call for an immediate reversal of or an exemption, at least even to perhaps try and align it or stall it or delay it until it's aligned with the European one when it comes in. But differentiating an area that we sell collectively as one area. We market the island of Ireland, and for to see all of the hard work dropped off that our members, we have worked very closely with Tourism Northern Ireland, Tourism Ireland, marketing, going to market with our programmes, and to see that dropped off would be an awful shame.
Yeah.
And damage. Our members can still programme the other areas, but how does Northern Ireland get that back when it's too late?
Okay, no, that message has been loudly heard, and I think it's something that we have to keep pushing for. You talked about developing outside of Belfast, and in the speech you also spoke about the need for more accommodation outside of Belfast. How do you see that? Has there been much development in the past year? What sort of areas is there a particular need for additional accommodation?
I think there's a few things. So I think since that I made those comments, we have seen a reduction in the government contracts that were taking up some of the hotel capacity. So that has obviously freed some up. And we have seen development, particularly on the North Coast. And we've also had external investment coming in, which has been good as well, where, hotels and that sort of, the external investors are seeing the benefit of Northern Ireland and investing in that. So we've still, work to do, but there's certainly, you can see the plans, they're in progress at the moment. We always have challenges with our planning system and things like the water and sewerage infrastructure, and those are things that can stop development, but there certainly is plans there. We currently, according to Tourism Ireland, we would have about 12% of the hotel accommodation across the island of Ireland, and we certainly would, we need to see that increase, but it's giving developers the confidence that if they invest, that they will see that return, and this is where we need to get things like ETA, etc., so that we're not creating barriers that give people a reason not to invest.
Okay, that's really interesting. I've always been opposed to contingency accommodation being used just from an integration perspective, but it's useful to have the economic one too. Rise in tourists using EVs and EV infrastructure. How's that going?
We've been working with the Car Rental Association of Ireland, and because they are getting more inquiries around electronic vehicles and stuff, and so they've been doing some work with actually the attractions across the island, and it's interesting how many have actually got EV charging facilities within their attractions. We still struggle as an infrastructure across the Northern Ireland. If you look at the work that's been done on the Causeway Coast route, and actually if you look and sort of see how much infrastructure is there, it is very challenging. It is something that we had brought up with the previous infrastructure minister, and we will again now we've got a new infrastructure minister. I know it's not seen necessarily as maybe one of the top priorities, but this is the way people are going, and we need to see that external investment. So again, it's about giving those organisations the confidence that we do have demand for that infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. I could ask lots of questions, but I'll just finish with the biggest barriers to long-term sustainable growth in our tourism sector today, and if you had to highlight a few key policy changes that we could focus on the committee, what would they be?
I think the overseas markets are really important, and you'll have seen I included a table. So we are getting about 12% of the revenue from those overseas markets, and we need to look and see how we can grow that. So it's about understanding really why would people not come to Northern Ireland as part of their trip to the island of Ireland, particularly the North American market, where we see we get about 4% of the revenue from those tourists coming to the island of Ireland. So I think there is work to be done to really understand what Northern Ireland needs to do to attract more people. We've seen investment. The city and growth deals are really important, and that will also help regional dispersal. So there's an area around that. I also think, with regards to the stewardship plans, I think it's really important that we start to get more detail about that.
Where would they sit? Would they sit within council, within the department?
They sit, well, they would be led by Tourism and I, but they would then bring in, councils and industry. So we're still waiting detail on exactly what they will look like, but it's about, this is about regional dispersal. So, and looking at a sort of a destination region is what is needed. So where are the gaps? And one of the things actually, when just going back to the EV one, is the importance of public transport. Again, a lot of people don't rent a car and they rely on public transport. And again, there's a bit of work to be done around that and how you connect and make it easier for people to get round the region.
Okay. Really
and also on that as well, Joanne, if I could come in, many of our members, including ourselves and BRAC Tours, are going through the Sustainable Tourism Network accreditation, which is a wonderful learning curve and educational piece, and it's hard work, but it's an eye opener. But the thing is, the sustainability and sustainable tourism is here, and we are embracing it. And as you highlighted, the infrastructure for the public transport is very important. We see great improvement there. Even from the cross-border early train Dublin to Belfast, that's making an impact. But from a sustainable point of view and going forward, it's a very much a key focus. And again, even touching on for the EV charging points, we would really like to see that coming on board very soon, because we're all embracing the sustainable tourism, and we're also going to market. We're seeing that the international market, some have a more appetite for it than others, but it's very much a key thing in programming and planning for people spending their money on any package holiday.
And I think in that sustainability piece as well, there is an action in the action plan around the aviation strategy, and I think it's really important to push that forward. We are an island off an island. People really have to fly to get to us, and how is that going to impact, especially on long haul markets? We are in a different place than the Republic of Ireland, who are a much more mature market. So therefore, there's more work that we need to do in some of these international markets to really promote Northern Ireland. So there's an area around that and how that's going to develop.
Thank you.
Thank you. Diana?
Thank you. Welcome this morning, and Joanne, it's great to see you. I really commend you as being, at the forefront with all things tourism and your dedication. So really, I'm going to sort of fly the flag a bit for Fermanagh. Obviously, Fermanagh South Tyrone, because here's the opportunity. Yeah. But obviously, we have our constraints and difficulties. I see in the hotel trade, a lot of it is weddings. So I have to say, there's a lot of development currently within Fermanagh on holiday accommodation, which I think is welcome if it's done within planning rules. So that's maybe where it is shifting towards. And I'd like to see more hotel growth when that opportunity does arrive. But you say in your document that the business event strategy is key. It's seen as one of the key marketing strategies, business events. And see just within a UU report there, 2024, that business travellers spend more time in Northern Ireland than they do in the Republic. But it also recognises that the number of nights spent is generally reducing, as is in Northern Ireland and the Republic, as is the case in more mature tourism markets since the 1990s. I mean, has our market peaked, or is it considered a mature market? I wouldn't think so. I think there's more development.
Yeah, no, Northern Ireland definitely wouldn't be seen as a mature market. I think we've done really well over really the last 20 years, in really developing and investing, and we had signature investment products, and you've got attractions like the Titanic Belfast, which is a real attractor, but then disperses out within Northern Ireland. So and that's why I say I think we do have to look at the international strategy for Northern Ireland as part of that island of Ireland, because we are in a different place, and as Nuala has said, there is pent up demand. So how do we ensure that we are getting the share of that market? Business tourism is so important because it's midweek. And so you're for the hospitality, for hotels, that is usually the challenging time during the week. So you're bringing people in who you're probably paying a premium to maybe holiday makers. And there's a lot of programming goes around conferences where there's opportunities to explore while you're here. So the business tourism is really good for getting people here, getting them interested, and then repeat coming as a holiday maker to spend time. And that's where areas like Fermanagh, the Newry Morning Down, because when you look at the dispersal, Causeway Coast obviously would be second, and then you have Fermanagh, and then you have Newry Morning Down. That would be the top regions in Northern Ireland, and it's great to see the development in accommodation, and again it's getting the mix right. So yes, we need the hotel accommodation, but people want different types of accommodation, and there is a good mix in Fermanagh, particularly around sort of self-catering and the different things.
And I would find as well, we were very lucky, ITOA, to have our Northern Ireland workshops held in Fermanagh just 2 years ago. And it was a fantastic opportunity, and it was the perfect timing to have it there. Our members attended for a 2-night, 3-day event, and we did fam trips and explored and got to learn all about not just the accommodation in the area, but the key takeaway from me and from our members and some of the hoteliers seeing that the benefits of that is the hub and spoke. So instead of when challenges were getting accommodation in, say, Donegal, their neighbour, So Enniskillen, for example, the largest town, and the quality of hotels there, they benefit and they continue to benefit. However, again, if this ETA comes in, but has it peaked? I would say absolutely not. I would say Northern Ireland is, it's only even, it hasn't even started, you know, and yes, there's always going to be challenges, but the demand is here. We have to realise the demand is here that never was here 10 or 20 years ago. So I think it's very important for the people on the ground and the businesses to understand it, just keep working at it, and but we don't need any more anything to delay it or to stall it.
I just want to also discuss the sub-regional destination stewardship plan. I mean, it's identifying major events on their own. I mean, I look within Fermanagh, the World Predator Fishing Championships, they're classic angling. Fishing is a really big thing on the continent, and I think this is obviously cross-departmental, but when you've got DERA, I suppose it's to do with waterways, navigation, access and so on, and inland waterways. I really do think there's an opportunity when you talk about major events, we're not talking about the Gulf Open, but we do have it there. We have an international recreational opportunity within fishing in Fermanagh. So I'd like to see that maybe taken more into account with the green credentials and the environment that there is there. The disadvantage a lot of tourists feel is the infrastructure, is the access. You know, Dublin to Fermanagh is like a sort of trip on its own, and so again, it's sort of really calling for more infrastructure, which would really help connectivity.
And I think, you know, this is the challenge for tourism, is that everything we need is not within the remit of the Department for the Economy, and infrastructure communities and DERA are really important, you know, in policies that they make will impact tourism. And that was one of the good things about the Tourism Partnership Board, that all of the departments were represented and part of that discussion. So there is more collaboration across the departments. But definitely I recognise fishing, you've got the sheep trials, you've got, you know, there's different things. And these... And I'm not leading on the destination stewardship plans, but I would. My understanding is that that's where you would be able to bring out, you know, what are the uniques around Fermanagh, and where are the areas that could be developed, and to bring in events or to really create a campaign of why people would come to the area.
Thank you, Diana, very much indeed. David.
Okay, thank you both for coming in. It's fascinating, and the ETA has kind of been well covered. But recently, the Minister's talked about taking peace tourism and doubling that, or using peace tourism, to double tourism to 2 billion. I think it was off the top of my head. Is that, what role does the Maze Law and Cash have within that to encourage that and grow that part of the market?
Okay. There's the Lagan Valley plug.
Seeing as we're going on.
To be fair, David, I can't talk to that. That's not something that we're involved in. However, with peace tourism, we actually had a really good session on that in our conference last year, where you know, we talked about, you know, peace tourism has been going on for so long, but very much under the radar. I think there's been a bit of fear around how do you promote that in a way that is inclusive and brings along everybody in, you know, here, as well as, you know, being attractive. But it is something that overseas visitors are really interested in, and I think it's a story of hope, you know, of how far we have come, and I think what we were saying as well is that we know there are different narratives, but how everybody who's involved in that is coming together and collaborating and understanding how we need to present that. We actually need to learn from those that are doing it on the ground and have the confidence. A bit like Titanic. We didn't talk about Titanic for years, you know, and it was something we didn't really want to admit to. But actually now that we've really understood that and we've treated all of that with respect, and you know, it's something now we can be proud of when we talk about, and it is a real attractor. And I think that's really where peace tourism and also the sort of the historic, you know, that we've amazing history, but it's just, I think it's having that confidence to make that more, I suppose, mainstream. You know,
and it's something we should be I suppose when it comes to peace tourism, we're a best kept secret when it comes to peace tourism, and people come here for, no matter what where they're coming from, every region in Northern Ireland has a story to tell. And the international visitors come from the stories. What they want to take away from it is up to them. But the benefit of it as well is it goes into the communities. And you mentioned a site as well. So it's not just the main cities. It's in all the regions. And I am actually delighted to be saying I have my first main political peace tourism tour coming in May. And
what would that look like?
Sorry?
What does that look like?
It's a short. The first one, it's a short trip, and it's going to be in Belfast, but it's taking in quite a lot of the different areas, very much cross community. And there's it's actually business tourism or businessmen that are coming. And I know it's just the first of many. However, from the North American market, I keep going back to the North American because that's the market I sell into. There's always been a curiosity and to come to Northern Ireland, and they come for the people and the stories, and it does probably always end up regarding peace tourism. And we're so proud to tell our story, and we have confidence, and it's a good story.
Absolutely. One of the reasons is it's in Lagan Valley, and the reason for the maze. I was there recently. And I don't think we're great at telling her. I don't think we're confident enough to tell our stories. Right? But I was in Bosnia in the summer, and it was the second time I was in Bosnia. And the first time I was there 6-7 years ago, we were in Croatia and we drove in. And the reason, it was just because it was close. But I went back because the story was incredible. The hope and inspiration was unbelievable. So we went back this year, and that's the bit. If somebody's coming onto the island, so forget kind of the political borders or whatever, people are coming to visit Ireland. If they come into Dublin, there's got to be a reason to bring them to the north. So there only is, we talked a little bit about infrastructure, there only is the A1 really to bring, or the train line to come up. So if they're coming up and they're on that coast, or the ancient east, and that product, and we're marketing that product, we're never attracting them to Hillsborough Castle on its own as a separate, but you might within the market in the ancient east. That's what I'm saying. But if you've attractions there working as a unit, then you start to move that 4-stop to north. One of those stops coming north, and I see that even programmed. It's not about just going to one visit. It's maybe 2 or 3 visitor attractions. And you mentioned Hillsborough Castle. It's a phenomenal addition. It is. And it's a phenomenal addition, and it's a good location. But again, it's just a stepping stone to other areas and other regions that have. I mean, Tourism Northern Ireland have invested heavily in the Embrace a Giant Spirit brand, and you can see throughout all of the regions a great variety of bespoke immersive experiences that we never had before. We never had 20, 15 years ago. We have them, and they're coming for that. Yeah. I also see that there's opportunities for Northern Ireland for the hub and spoke to stay longer. It's all about staying longer, spending more, coming right over the border and spending there. Armagh, for example, is a prime location for hub and spoke. Mid-Ulster as well, and all of those regions can disperse, and it's about cross-selling as well.
Yeah. And I think one of the things is, just building that and go back to Fermanagh, is obviously the Hidden Heartlands. Yeah. So, that's where a lot of collaboration has gone on, and really is the first one of the sort of Fulsh Island brands that really will come into Northern Ireland, and that's really important to both sides, actually, to create more depth, but also more reasons to stay longer.
Yeah. No, listen, thank you. I suppose it's around that. If we're saying the target is to go to 2 billion, to double that, then we've got to do something different than we're doing now to enable that. So if it hasn't happened to date, it's not going to happen unless there's a change. And I suppose it's the wider, I suppose the other bit of peace tourism we can think of, a 30-year history or 40-year history, whatever, but rather than the kind of the bigger story, or the full story, if you like, coming right through, especially the Maze Long Cache site. There's much history there, not just kind of the more recent. So it's telling all of that story in a way. Just to finish, just in Bosnia, what they did in the Srebrenica was just literally everybody that died was on a photograph on a wall, and they just went through a timeline of story. That there was no narrative. It was just a timeline of events with press, BBC, Reuters, whoever, photographs or image or video. But it, genuinely, as a tourist that didn't know much about the war, it's so inspiring.
And I think the thing to remember is it's happening on the ground. Sinead's here, obviously. There's a lot going on in Derry. And there, actually what you're finding is that now the attractions around that are starting to really understand the economic impact, are starting to look at, well, actually we're attracting people from overseas. So but it is happening and it's very strong, but it's how do you
scale it?
Develop that bit further.
But it does take time. It's you have to consider as well. We had COVID in the middle of it, so that stalled things. And really, last year it's like tourism back starting again, and that was the year of getting back on the saddle. Now it's 2024 into 2025. And I do see that there is going to be a progression. I'm very confident that because the demand is there from various markets to come to Northern Ireland. And we have so many opportunities here. But the spend is, I suppose the spend into the regions and the communities, and we see it, as Joanne said, with Fulch Ireland and Tourism Northern Ireland working together, is phenomenal. And that... But the key thing is they're coming into Dublin. Over 70% or 80% of our visitors have to come into Dublin from the international markets. So it's the opportunities are there, and you say they haven't come. They are coming. They will, and we just don't need any obstacles to stop them.
Okay, we have a few minutes left, so I'll bring in a couple of last people for questions. Gary, first of all.
We will keep it brief. Obviously, lots of questions. I suppose one comment and then a question. Just in terms of that peace tourism piece, I think we do have to be careful around it. I know certainly, and I speak certainly from my own constituency, where consent hasn't been given by families to tell the story. There's an element of rewriting of some of the history, and I think that we just have to tread carefully. I appreciate that there's a market for the story being told, but it's how it's told in a way that is respectful to the trauma and the history of this place. So it's just a comment, and one that we'll be keeping a very close eye on in terms of certainly as a committee. The question that I had was just around domestic tourism. I think that there has clearly been a decline, or certainly a flatlining in respect of that. What more can be done? Obviously your top three priorities, one of them was around reducing the regulatory burden, the business rate system. Anecdotally, I hear a lot of people say to me, it's so expensive now to get a hotel in Northern Ireland. If I go to stay in Belfast, for example, you could pay, what you would have paid a few years ago, £80 per night, you're now paying up to £300 per night. So is that solely down to, regulation, rising costs, or are there other issues that we can try and ensure that people stay here and enjoy what Northern Ireland has to offer?
Yeah, and I think with the domestic tourism, what we're actually saying is there's been a move from overnight trips to day trips. So there's a big domestic day trip, yes. But people aren't necessarily staying overnight. They're doing more day trips. I think, obviously the cost of living has impacted both on businesses and increased costs, and unfortunately when costs increase, they never seem to come back down to the level that they were at, and so therefore there's coming out of the pandemic, and we saw in our survey, 50% of businesses only have about 3 months or up to 3 months reserves. So there's not as much in the business to be able to, to really take in these costs without passing them on. So there are challenges there. I also think, it is a supply and demand, and again, domestic probably wanting to come at weekends, etc. And that's where really, I suppose, we have to do more around that regional dispersal, and where there's maybe a mix of different types of accommodation to give people that choice. But it's really it's communication, and that promotion for domestic by Tourism NI is really important. But it is something we are seeing. There does seem to be a balancing.
Huge question. I appreciate you're not going to be able to answer it all in the time. that's given. But what I would say is just to commend the work that you are doing. I think that there's certainly a role, even when I look at some of the influencers and what they're doing, I think there's a positive message there.
Yes.
And it's about making people aware of actually what we have to offer.
Yeah.
And for me, as somebody who lives in the Northwest, you know, even during the pandemic, you were visiting places that you never would have thought of going to, or certainly even aware of. So,
and it is something usually, the things that are right on your doorstep are the things you probably know least about. Can I just come back to you on the peace tourism? Absolutely get what you say. There is a group that Tourism and I are leading, all around that, so bringing together the people who really understand that and how that needs to be marketed. So absolutely taken.
Just waiting the detail on that, so hopefully we get it. No, thank you.
And with that in mind, Sinead.
Sorry,
Sinead.
I'm sorry, I forgot you were there. Sorry, Sinead.
Thank you, and thanks Joanne and Nuala for your presentation and insight today to the sector. It's an extremely important sector for Northern Ireland, and it has so much potential. It has so much potential in my city as well. We're nowhere near where we need to be, and we need to grow our product and our dwell time. And again, that domestic visitor is so key and so important. And one of the things that are really concerning me at the minute, Joanne, and I mentioned it when we were on the floor discussing the VAT and about the all-island VAT situation, where we could, where we're actually going to be losing out when the Irish government rolls in a 9% VAT on tourism within the Republic of Ireland. That differentiation is really so difficult to compete with. But the other area that I'm really concerned with is the trend now for hospitality businesses to operate on a part-time basis during the week. And this is because the challenge of the overheads that they're experiencing and the increased costs of doing businesses. But like literally, you know, there are very, very few restaurants that are open on a Monday, Tuesday, and sometimes a Wednesday in our city centres, and that applies equally, I suppose, to Belfast as it does to Derry. And this is really difficult because, particularly during the height of the summer season, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's midweek or weekend, visitors need to eat, and they need to have a variety of places in which they can eat. Are you concerned with that? And I'm particularly concerned about that business visitor as well, which tends to be, as you said, a midweek visitor to our region.
Yeah. Two things. Just very quickly on the VAT. There has been an economic report published recently, which I can send a link to the committee, which actually is recommending that, and this is for the South, recommending that they do not go ahead with the 9%, and in fact they look to increasing it from 13.5%. So I think there's some discussion around that hasn't been finally signed off. However, where the big thing is, which you touched on, is weddings. And particularly in border areas where, you know, if you've got 100 people at a wedding, actually having that differential in VAT would make a significant difference and could sway you on where you would have it. So I know that is something the wedding sector are looking at. And you know, we would love to not have that competitive disadvantage, same as air passenger duty. Again, so there's a number of things on that. On the restaurants part-time, this has been an issue since COVID. We have seen that. So a couple of reasons. One, skills and people. We had a lot of people left the industry, the costs, etc. So businesses' focus was on retaining the staff that they had, really creating that work-life balance, and they weren't getting the demand. And so we did see that really Thursday, potentially Sunday being the main opening time. And this has been something that we have really been trying to understand. Business tourism is important, and it's, again, we are starting to see the growth of business tourism since the pandemic, because obviously it was one of the ones that was really hit, and it's about really helping restaurants to see where the demand is coming from. Obviously, hotel development is another thing. What we have seen, though, is that people who would have gone to a restaurant are now eating in hotels, because that's the option that they have. We also, again, have the challenge of staff, and you know, the recruitment of staff. restaurants then need to look at nearly putting a whole team in to be able to open for more days during the week. So there are many challenges there, and we are part of the action plan. Obviously, has the bespoke skills action plan, which will help to address that. But also, it's about how do we help those businesses on the ground to understand where the demand is coming from. So what are the campaigns, how, who is coming in, and where are we losing out because they're not open. But it is, and it's across the region, Sinead, as you said.
Time for one last
it's something
question.
that we probably really have to tackle, in relation to skills. For the sector as well, and it should be a concentration of our minds, even within the government, within the executive, that we try to overcome that, because it's all about the experience for the visitor, whether they come back, whether they'll bring others as well, and if our product and particularly our restaurants are not there, it just hulks out your city centre and your towns and villages not having that vibrancy.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Can I thank you for your representations here today? I think it's clear from the committee as a whole that we value the vital role that the tourism sector plays right across Northern Ireland, and we'll continue to champion your asks and your requests, both within the department but also across these islands. So thank you so much indeed for your time. I would really be really interested, Nuala, if it's not commercially sensitive, if you could send us your itinerary for your peace tourism visit.
Yes,
at some
it's
stage.
work
Whenever
I will
yeah.
send that,
yeah.
But it'll be obviously confidential.
Of course,
as well.
no. I'd just be keen to see it. I'm glad to see that people are doing this. I often see that what people see as a visit to Belfast is they drive up on a bus up the Shankill Road and the Falls Road, and they look out like they're in a zoo and look, stare at these people and think they're very strange people and don't spend a penny on either West Belfast or North Belfast.
I can assure you it's very different,
yeah.
and I know that it's the first of others that they're going to be doing as well.
Yeah.
So I just again like to thank you and the committee for your time. Obviously we do provide a weekly update, which I think you get, and hopefully the committee get that. If there are any specific areas that any committee member wants to, please just get in touch. We're more than happy to meet up and talk things in more detail. So,
thank you so much. I appreciate
it. Thank you very much.
Okay, Peter.
So Chairperson of the committee can tend to write to the Northern Ireland Tourism Alliance, just asking them for feedback on their ETA webinar, their report, linked to the report on hospitality VAT in the Republic of Ireland, and the itinerary of the peace tourism event.
Okay.
If members content.
Agreed?
Yep, agreed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I move to item 9 now.
Sorry, just one thing. I'd quite like to get an update from TU on the international relations strategy, given the importance that tourism plays in it. I don't know why we don't have it yet.
Maybe we've written before, but we can
write again.
Write again.
Right again, thank you.
I don't think we got an answer the last time.
Perfect. Okay. Item 9 then is delegated legislation insolvency practitioners. The clerk's note is at page 551. In respect of the statutory rule SR 19/2025, insolvency practitioners recognise professional bodies. Revocation of Recognition Order Northern Ireland 2025. The rule is not subject to assembly procedure and will come into effect on today. Insolvency practitioners are authorised by a professional body which the Department recognises under Articles 350 of the Insolvency Northern Ireland Order 1989. There are currently 5 such bodies known as recognised professional bodies and include the Chartered Accountants in Ireland. They have advised that it has very few insolvency practitioners and no longer wishes to be an RPB. The rule revokes its recognition. The committee considered the SL1 on the 29th of January and had no concerns. It is understood that the rule does not deviate from the original rule. Do members have any questions, or are they content to note? Okay, thank you. Item 10, members delegated legislation FE student support. Again, the department has not provided the information for us to move forward with the SR, so are members content that we defer this again? Okay, item 11 is correspondence. There is a proposed action in the tabled papers for each of the items. Are members content to agree those as outlined in the index?
Yep.
Okay, forward work plan, Peter.
Quick one, members. So next week we'll do some budget deliberations, and the week after, sorry about this, we'll have Fibrous in, Okay, right, good. I'm trying to get them sooner, but we've other things to do, right?
Yeah, no, well, I mean, going by the current rate of things, there'll still
There'll
be
still
people
be
in the
people,
Ulster
yeah,
without
yeah,
their
yeah.
internet.
We were the same, actually.
Oh my God.
I'd heard of the radio 1100 the other day, which is crazy. So yeah.
So the utility regulators agreed to brief in March on RP7, etc. Also, the department was just in contact with me recently. Disability Support Service, they want to provide a written briefing on that only. So we'll just see what they get, and then members can make up their minds what they feel about that. Yeah.
This was the briefing that was going to be in closed session, but now
written.
it's just going to be written.
No, yeah. Well, so members can decide what they think of that.
Let's see what they provide written for them, and then if we need them, we can get them.
Additionally, Chairperson, I've been contacted by 2 House of Commons committees. There's the Select Committee on Business and Trade, and they're coming over on the 11th and 12th of March and want to meet with committee members to talk about EU-UK trade and the Windsor Framework. Again, it's up to members. You might take the view that this isn't for us, it's for Windsor Framework Committee, but I'm not sure what view they take. So, do you want to meet with them?
Yeah, let's do it. We've done it with other visitors from the Republic and from across Europe, so let's do it for our UK friends too.
Additionally, okay, so then there's the House of Commons International Agreement Committee. They're coming over on the 7th of May, so they're talking to devolved legislatures about international trade treaties and the scrutiny of the same, so they've asked to meet too.
Well, David is our expert on international trade treaties. I'll lead them. But yeah, no, that's fine.
Happy enough. That's all I have, members.
Okay. Any other business member stories at this stage? David? Yep. Okay, perfect. Okay, if not, members, we will be back here next week at 10 a.m. Thank you very much. The committee will now adjourn.
Members, the Nita would like a photograph if members are free.
No,
have they gone?
They might have gone. We'll just have a double.
Committee Room 30. Sound. Committee Room 30. Sound. Committee Room 30. Sound.